2026. This meeting is being broadcast live to our YouTube channel. Can I extend a warm welcome to the members of the public and to those viewing online. Disrupt the meeting in any way. Can I ask everyone in the chamber to switch off or make silent their mobile phones and all other electronic devices. Before we commence with the items of business on the agenda, it is with great sadness. Well, that's the first failure of the day, isn't it? Before we commence the item of business on the agenda, it is with great sadness to formally report the death of former Sedgefield Borough Councillor, Alderman John Burton. John Burton served for 33 years on the former Sedgefield Borough Council and was made an honorary alderman in 2009. So can I ask for us all to stand for one moment's silence, please? Thanks very much. Let's have a look here. Item 1, the minutes. Can I have a mover?
I'll move those, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Addison. And a seconder?
I second those, Chair. Thank you.
To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January 2026. Are the minutes agreed? Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare an interest in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Thank you. Item 3, Chair's announcements. Proceedings relating to the budgetary items. Colleagues, since the focus of this morning's meeting is to set the budget and council tax, I am seeking agreement from the Council to waive standing orders to allow for the extension of the meeting should it go beyond 2.5 hours. Do I have a seconder?
Chair, I'd like to second that.
Thanks, Councillor Husband. Can I ask the Council to agree to this course of action, please? Thank you. Colleagues, please remember that robust debate and disagreeing with one another is a healthy part of democracy and is part of the democratic process. But we all have a responsibility to keep our interactions and debate respectful in the chamber. Let us remember that during this morning's important proceedings. Can I also remind the Council that points of order may only relate to an alleged breach of the Council procedures, rules or the law. If you wish to raise a point of order, you must indicate the rule or law and the way you consider it to have been broken. A point of order can be raised at any time and will be heard immediately. Where points of order are raised, once a ruling have been made on advice of the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, it will not be revisited. A member may make a point of personal explanation at any time. A personal explanation may only relate to some material part of an earlier speech by a member, which may appear to have been misunderstood in the present debate. Explanations in relation to statements made outside of the debate are not permitted. Where points of personal explanation are made, once a ruling has been made on the advice of the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, it will not be revisited. So please bear these definitions in mind before seeking to raise such points to ensure that we do not interrupt the flow of debate. I now move to item 4, which is the leader's report. The leader has informed me that given the focus of the meeting today, which is to set the budget and council tax, he does not intend on presenting a report. So we go to item 5, which is the questions from the public. There are no public questions for today's meeting. Item 6 is petitions, and we have no petitions to be presented today. So can I swiftly move on to item 7, which is the report from the Cabinet. Can I ask the Leader of the Council to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I table the report as set out in the agenda and ask Council to note it.
Any questions? No. Can I ask the Council to note the report? Item 8, Budget 2026-2027. This report under Section 25 of the Local Government Act of 2003. Can I ask the Corporate Director of Resources, Paul Darby, to present this report, please?
Thank you and good morning, members. This report fulfils the Council's statutory responsibilities under Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003, which states that when an authority is considering its budget and setting its council tax for the forthcoming year, its Chief Finance Officer is required to present their professional opinion on 2 things. Firstly, the robustness of the estimates made in the preparation of the budget and for the purpose of calculating what is called the council tax requirement, and secondly, the adequacy of reserves allowed for in the budget proposals. As this Council's Chief Finance Officer, the arrangements I put in place to discharge these legal responsibilities and my professional opinion on these matters is something I take very seriously. This report is one of the most important reports that I present to yourselves. It gives you the assurance that you need in terms of relying on the figures and the underpinning assumptions that have formed the basis of the budget proposals you will consider shortly. Included in the report is an overview of your legal responsibilities as members to facilitate the setting of a balanced budget and the implications of not doing so. This is set out in Appendix 2, and members should note that jointly and severably, that is, collectively and individually, you all have a fiduciary responsibility to local council taxpayers. This means you have a legal duty to facilitate, rather than obstruct, the setting of a lawful budget, and you must exercise that duty by no later than the 11th of March. The MTFP 16 forecasts you are about to receive cover the period 2026-27, next financial year, and the 3 years that follow that, 27-28 to 29-30. In terms of the robustness of the estimates, I've set out at paragraphs 29 to 69 of this report the process that has been followed and some of the key issues underpinning the budgets and the reports to be considered today. The budget proposals presented today are the end of a long, difficult and in-depth process, a process that has had to incorporate the impact of the government's comprehensive spending review and the most significant changes to local government finance in over a decade through the fair funding reforms, with that process only coming to a conclusion last week on the 9th of February when the final local government finance settlement was published. I'm happy to give my opinion to Council that based on the work undertaken, the estimates can be considered to be robust and can be relied upon when you're taking your decisions today, and that adequate provision has been made for all known risks with contingencies and sufficient reserves in place for any unforeseen events that may transpire during the coming year. At paragraph 76 to the report, there is a summary of the key risks that surround the Council's budget and MTFP planning, which could impact on the Council's resources and which have been set out in more detail in the budget report you will consider. In the report, I've highlighted the significant inflationary and demand pressures which we are presently facing both next year and across the next 4 years, the significant uncertainty that had existed in recent years with regards to the future financial settlements has largely been addressed, as for the first time in this decade, we have been allocated a multi-year settlement covering the period 26-27 to 28-29, which will allow us to plan ahead with and make decisions on how to balance the Council's budget over the next 3 years, much more certain. The fair funding reviews and the updated fair funding assessment are sought to address some of the inequities in the current funding formula and it resulted in the Council receiving additional core funding of £23.7 million next year, and further uplifts of £16.2 million in 27-28 and £11.9 million in 28-29, as the Government has sought to bring in these changes over a 3-year period. The total uplift in core funding over the next 3 years is just under £52 million. Members should note that the Fair Funding Review has not addressed whether the Council is adequately funded for its statutory responsibilities that we're required to meet, nor has it taken into account the cumulative impacts of the existing funding formula on authorities like ourselves, who have been effectively underfunded since the current formula was put in place in 2013, but has sought to redistribute the funding being made available to the sector in a more fairer and different way. In the report, I've highlighted the scale of the financial challenges we are facing in terms of balancing our budget across the coming 4 years, where cost increases are expected to exceed the additional funding we have been allocated, leaving us still in a position of having to consider and deliver further budget savings and efficiencies alongside considering applying council tax increases to balance the budget. The report highlights the enduring and significant cost pressures in our children's looked after placements budget, where we must make available an extra £19.4 million of budget provision next year to address the rising demand and cost pressures in this area of the budget. These budgets have seen extraordinary increases over the last 6 years and will increase to around £117 million next year, with further increases anticipated in 27-28 and beyond, and with the expectation that those budgets will be around £127 million by the end of this MTFP planning period, which is astonishing when you consider that this budget, as recently as 2018-19, was £24 million. These cost pressures are still not being adequately provided for in the Government's funding formula allocations. The Council has a range of strategies to try and manage and mitigate these cost pressures, and indeed the measures being taken and planned are mitigating around £31 million of budget pressures in this area. In other words, without the action that is being taken and is planned, the MTFP forecast would have been £31 million worse. The report highlights the capital financing revenue implications of the additional prudential borrowing commitments arising from the existing capital programme and the new capital programme commitments that are set out in the reports. These revenue commitments to meet the cost of service and loans that will need to be taken out to fund that capital expenditure are built into our medium-term financial planning forecast, so in that regard they are affordable and prudent. Whilst capital financing costs are becoming an increasing proportion of the Council's revenue budget, the level of debt gearing and the proportion of the budget allocated to meet these fixed costs are in line with other authorities. The timing of taking out loans necessary to meet what is called our capital financing requirement, i.e. our need to borrow, is managed closely to ensure the Council does not lock into loans at higher coupon rates than has been provided for in the revenue budget. The capital strategy and treasury management strategy and associated policies which govern how we manage that arrangements are set out and appended to the budget report for Council consideration today. The current capital programme commitments, based on decisions made by Council this time last year, require the Council to take on new additional borrowing of £405 million over the next 3 financial years. New capital programme commitments set out in the budget today will commit the Council to taking out an additional £150 million of new borrowing, with £2.6 million of this classed as self-financed borrowing, linked to necessary essential investments in the Council's assets and core infrastructure, but also to support the Cabinet and Council priorities. External borrowing at the 1st of April this financial year was just under £435 million and is forecast to be around £480 million by the end of this financial year, an in-year increase of around £45.5 million. The Council will still be under-borrowed against its capital financing requirement by £193.4 million at the end of this financial year, which compares to an under-borrowed position of £159 million at the 1st of April, as we continue to delay taking on the additional borrowing that is necessary to fund the capital programme, whilst interest rates remain high. The MTFP capital programme, the current capital programme agreed last year, produces a capital financial requirement in total of £989 million to the 31st of March 2028. The MTFP 16 forecasts are predicated on us taking an additional £150 million of external borrowing on top of that over the next 4 years. By the 31st of March 2029, at the end of this MTFP planning period, our actual external debt is forecast to be £838 million, and will still be £242 million under borrowed against our capital financing requirement for external loans of just over £1 billion at that point. I appreciate these numbers are significant, but members can be assured that the revenue impacts of servicing these loans are built into our current and future budget provision as part of the budget report you will consider, though there will still be a need for an extra £3.6 million of revenue commitments to be factored into the MTFP 17 process for 2030, 31 and beyond. The MTFP 16 forecasts include the proposed council tax increase next year, but have not factored in any council tax increases beyond 2026-27. The council will have the ability over that period to apply up to a 4.99% increase in council tax. A 4.99% increase in council tax would generate around £15.4 million in additional council tax in any 1 year. The 26-27 budget has been balanced through a combination of the additional core government grant funding, the additional council tax revenues to be generated from the decisions made by Council in December to cap the local council tax reduction scheme for working age claimants, and through the planned delivery of £12.9 million of budget savings, and through the 1.99% council tax increase which is proposed today. We will be able to balance the budget next year without the use of the MTFP support reserve for the first time since 22-23, which is the only other time we've been able to do so since 2010. Across the 4-year MTFP planning period, the Council faces a budget deficit and additional savings requirement, assuming the budget is agreed today, of £44.7 million, with £10.8 million of this falling into 27-28 and £20.9 million of this falling into 28-29, which will require a suite of savings to come from the transformation programme and consideration of further council tax increases in 27-28 and beyond to balance the budgets. In terms of the adequacy of reserves, I've set out in sections 70 to 96 my assessment of this, which includes details of the best practice guidance by CIPFA in terms of the level, purpose and reasons for holding reserves. I've included in this part of the report the Council's position in terms of the CIPFA Financial Resilience Index, which are a series of indicators that are used as an early warning system for authorities in financial distress. What these indicators show is that the Council, relative to other councils of our size and type, has an overall level of reserves slightly above average. Our relative position has improved over the last couple of years, mainly because other councils have seen larger reductions in their reserves than we have, which is in itself an indicator of financial distress in the wider sector. The Council's reserve levels at the 31st of March 25, excluding schools and public health, represents around 37% of the Council's net revenue budget, a reduction from the previous year end when the overall level of reserves were 41.1% of the net revenue budget. There is a comparative table in the report at paragraph 77 setting out the movement in reserves over the last 4 years. In the current year, our forecasts indicate that there will be a further £8.7 million reduction in our overall reserves position this year. Over the last few years, as part of this report, I have highlighted the significant and escalating risks associated with the high needs deficit position, where the cumulative deficit to the 31st of March this year is forecast to be around £40 million, an increase of around £17 million from the position at the start of this financial year. Over the next 2 financial years, there is expected to be significant in-year shortfalls also of between £20 and £25 million, which will mean that by the 31st of March 2028, the cumulative high needs deficit would have been around £85 to £95 million based on our current forecasts. Members will note that the exceptional accounting override, which allows us to treat these deficits off balance sheet and not crystallise them in the general fund, expires on the 31st of March 28. The government announced last year that it would take on responsibility for fully funding high needs SEND provision from 28-29 onwards. On the 9th of February, as part of the local government finance settlement, the government finally gave some clarity on how these deficits accumulated to date and over the next 2 years will be treated, announcing that it would give up to 90% support to offset these deficits, with the payments for the deficit to the 31st of March this year expected to be triggered sometime in the autumn and dependent on the Department for Education signing off on a local SEND reform plan. The government have also stated that they, as I said, they will extend that support to the next 2 financial years also. The announcements are welcome and at long last provide some clarity on the significant problem that is sector-wide, and had those deficits materialised in the General Fund, many of the authorities responsible for SEND provision would have been in a Section 114 position had they been required to fund those locally. The Council can expect that will receive around £36 million of grant funding to clear those deficits sometime in this autumn, and then receive similar payments for the following 2 financial years, but we're left with a £4 million local charge to meet in terms of the deficit accumulated to the 31st of March this year, and around sort of £4.5 to £5.5 million for the deficits that will be accumulated over the next 2 financial years. So the Council will have a bill of around £8.5 to £9.5 million to meet locally. The budget proposals you are about to consider do not include any utilisation of the MTFP support reserve. For comparison purposes, the MTFP support reserve had to contribute £3.5 million to balance in the 25-26 budget. The balance on the MTFP support reserve at the end of this year will be £34.6 million. As members will be aware, using reserves to balance recurrent expenditure is not a long-term solution and is not in line with CIPFA guidance and best practice. The use of the MTFP support reserve will, however, undoubtedly be required in future years to smooth in the transformational savings that will be required to assist in meeting the budget deficits from 27-28 onwards. Chair, I'm satisfied that the level of reserves is appropriate and proportionate to a council of our size and complexity, and in the face of the financial challenges we will face. The recommended policy on reserves, taking all these factors into account, is set out at paragraph 93 to the report, and it's my professional opinion that I am satisfied that the earmarked reserves have been set aside for specific legitimate purposes. In conclusion, Chair, it is my professional opinion that if the Council were to accept the Cabinet's budget proposals, including its proposals in terms of the council tax increases next year, which are below the government's expectations because of the savings proposal that have been developed and the decisions reached on the council tax reduction scheme, then I am satisfied that the risks identified in the budget setting process, alongside the government's recent announcements on the treatment of the high needs deficits and our track record over many years of managing our finances, means that despite the clear challenges that are to come, we have adequate reserves as we move forward, though we need to recognise that our overall resilience has reduced somewhat in recent years, and the challenges in terms of delivering significant further savings on top of the savings that have been delivered in previous years will require some difficult decisions to be made in terms of transforming service delivery from 27-28 onwards. The recommendations, Chair, are set out at paragraph 13 of the report, which are for Council to have regard to this report and my views when considering and approving the budget and the level of council tax for 26-27. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions regarding this report? Councillor Wilkes.
Sorry, Chair. Apparently I've put that in too soon.
Councillor Brown. Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul. Too soon.
Are there any questions on Section 25 of the Local Government Act report? I take it that's a no. Can I ask the Council to have regard to this report and to the opinions set out in it when considering and approving the budget and the level of council tax for 2026-2027? Before we move on to the... Do you agree to the report provided by Mr Darby? Thank you. So, before we move on to the next item, can I remind the Council that under paragraph 14.6 of the Council Procedure Rules, recorded votes will take place for each of the budget and council tax items and for any amendments. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, agenda items 9 and 10 in relation to the budget and council tax settings are inextricably linked. Therefore, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 11C, I move a motion without notice that items 9 and 10 are considered together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder?
Chair, I'll second that motion.
Does the Council agree to the motion and take the two items together? Thank you. Assuming it is all agreed by the Council, the Director of Legal and Democratic Services will provide an explanation to the Council on how this will work, including the times allowed for members making speeches.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So, because we're taking the two items together, it does have an impact on the time limits for speeches, as it being the budget meeting does as well. So, the time limits will be as follows. Movers of motions and group leaders will have 10 minutes to speak. Councillor Shuttleworth, as group leader of the Durham County Council Independents, has indicated that he's unable to attend today's meeting, but the Chair has agreed that in his absence, a member of his group, Councillor Chris Lyons, may speak on behalf of his group for up to 10 minutes in the absence of the leader. Seconders, unless group leaders, will have 6 minutes. The Chair of Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board will be invited to speak first once the debate opens. He will have 6 minutes. All other speakers will have 3 minutes. The mover of items 9 and 10 will have a 6-minute right of reply before we vote on the items. The usual rules of debate apply. Each member can speak once on a motion, other than the mover who has a 3-minute right of reply. A 6-minute right of reply. If an amendment is moved and seconded, the debate is on that amendment. Only one amendment may be moved and discussed at any one time, and no further amendments may be moved until the amendment under discussion has been disposed of. Any amendments will be shown on screen and emailed to all members. Each member can speak once on an amendment, except for the mover of the original motion, and again they have a right of reply before the amendment is put to the vote, but may not otherwise speak on it. If an amendment is carried, it will become part of the substantive motion. If the amendment falls, the debate goes back to the original motion. And as the Chair has already indicated, recorded votes will be taken on all items. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So, item 9, which is the medium-term financial plan for 2026 and 27 to 2028-29, and revenue and capital budget of 2026-27, and item 10, the council tax setting in order to meet the county council's council tax requirement for 2026 will be debated together. Can I ask the Deputy Leader of the Council to present and move the two reports, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I feel a bit lonely this morning, actually, because I walked in and there wasn't a single person stood at the door. Not a single one, a single protester. I said, does Durham County Council not want, you know, a clamour of people out there saying, please increase my taxes to the max? You know, we want the old way of doing things. No, apparently not. I'm absolutely delighted to present and move the Cabinet's budget proposals for 26-27 and to outline the medium-term financial forecasts for the period 26-27 to 29 and 30. This is our first set of budget proposals. It is, of course, a historic moment for all of Reform members, and all within 10 months of taking control of this august institution. This report is the culmination of months and months of hard work, which commenced immediately after the elections last May. We've had 4 detailed reports considered by the Cabinet in the lead up to today, and all along the way we've prioritised securing value for money challenging waste, cancelling vanity projects and virtue signalling, all with a view to limiting the council tax increase as much as possible. We've deliberately not included any assumed council tax increases beyond the modest increase that we're imposing next year in our MTFP forecast. Importantly, the social care precept only core council tax frozen at 0%. And we're doing that to avoid being held hostage by future forecasts and whatever this government decide to do to us in this county next. At each stage of the budget setting process, we've sought to involve scrutiny. The notes of the most recent meeting on 12th of February have been circulated under separate cover, and I'd like to thank all members of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board for their engagement in the budget process this year. The report includes details of the 2 rounds of the public and stakeholder budget consultation, including with business ratepayers and trade unions, plus other partners and stakeholders across the autumn of last year and into January of this. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to engage in that consultation, and their feedback, which is summarised in the report and attached at Appendix 18 and 19, has been carefully considered by the Cabinet. The budget's been prepared against a backdrop of significant unavoidable inflationary and demand pressures, particularly in our statutory social care services, with budget pressures linked to children and adult social care totalling nearly 30 million next year and 69 million across the next 4 years, representing the lion's share of the forecast of £138 million of unavoidable spending pressures that we'll face over the next 4 years. £138 million of unavoidable spending pressures. Cost pressures largely driven by statutory requirements set by Whitehall and national decisions on things like the pay award, the national living wage increase, new burdens such as the requirements to roll out the weekly food waste collection from next year and to meet the costs of the emission trading scheme and the introduction of the Fair Pay Agreement for social care, which combined the forecast to result in a 9.8 million cost pressure in 28-29, the same year that the government have saw fit to withdraw 3.5 million. You know, all those Labour politicians telling you that we ought to be like the cat that got the cream. Well, that cat, that particular kiddie's getting 3.5 million quid taken off it in 28-29. So, it's going to be a challenging year. And members will see that the council has benefited from just under 52 million of additional core funding across the next 3 years. Again, Labour politicians saying that we received £170 million. I tell you right now, if it was £170 million, I would be like the cat that got the cream and skipping into this chamber. It is nothing so short of deceit, my friends. The changes to the local government funding formula that will be applied from next year are to be welcomed, don't get me wrong, but they're well overdue and in reality too little too late for the hard-pressed council taxpayers of County Durham who've suffered from the decisions taken by successive national governments and from the decisions by the previous administration of this council. And I do have to say, it is pretty obvious to me that none of the cabinet in government have actually served in a business, have set up their own business, actually know what it's like to be a young person trying to get a job as a working class individual. You cannot do it. The pressures are too high, insurmountable for businesses, and they've become insurmountable for this council too. As we've heard earlier, the additional funding does little to repair the damage caused over the last 12 years that the current formula has been in place, a period where we've been significantly and consistently underfunded. The additional funding, though welcome, bears no relation to the cost pressures that we actually face, so to call it a fair funding review is laughable. I would also note that the 52 million of additional core grant by 28-29 is substantially well below, I repeat, well below that 170 million quid figure bandied about in the press and elsewhere, and not challenged, by the way, by many members of the press, which are supposed to hold politicians to account. There have been many things that we would like to do as a new administration, but our hands have been tied by costs that we simply must meet in terms of statutory social care. And let's be fair, we've only had 10 minutes. 10 months rather. It feels like it's been only 10 minutes. 10 months, we're early to the pitch, the match is still in play, but those changes that we've made supporting vulnerable adults and children have been a top priority. That's why we declared a care emergency and undeclared a climate emergency. And my friends, I would say the proof of the pudding is very much in the eating on that one. We have gone above and beyond to help and meet those demands and those pressures and create new places. We've had to make some difficult choices to protect the hard-working council taxpayers of County Durham. It was a pledge we made, and it's a promise that we've delivered. We're able to balance the budget next year with only a 1.99% increase in council tax, not because of the additional funding we've received, but because we'll deliver £12.9 million of budget savings and efficiencies next year. Because we've taken the decision that we have with regards of capping the local council tax reduction scheme for working age claimants. We on this side of the chamber believe it to be fair and proportionate for those on benefits to actually start to contribute to the council tax services that we all receive. And I tell you what, there are people in the working world who are struggling more in this day and age than people on benefits. And we've taken the decisions we have with regards also to generating an additional £2.2 million through that efficiency, through that saving in council tax revenue. And we've removed unnecessary cost burdens associated with the pursuit of net zero targets. No more EV bin lorries. By removing the costs of electrifying that fleet, when the technology and range associated with the electric vehicles is not up to the job, that is a saving in and of itself. Without these measures, we would have needed to increase the council tax by nearly 7% to balance the budget. So I fail to see how any of those on the opposite side of the chamber are going to claim that the 1.99% increase proposed is all down to the long overdue additional funding that we've received from central government. Insufficient as it is, but the facts and reality of the situation are markedly different from what's been said in the media. It's almost like they've got a problem with reform. I don't know what it is. As I said, we've prioritised limiting the increase as far as we could and not taking the easy route of just banging up the council tax by 5%. Our proposed council tax increase is well below inflation and will be lower than almost every other local authority in our region and across the country. And actually, I'm pretty certain that as far as the North East is concerned, that we are going above and beyond. ITV asked me this morning if we had any rabbits to pull out of the hat. I said, well, I'm
One
not,
minute, Councillor.
I ain't Paul McGee or Debbie, but I think that's one hell of a rabbit that we have pulled out of the hat already. Now, this budget includes £263.7 million of new capital investments across the next 4 years. It's a proper medium-term financial capital strategy to be funded by, in addition to the new additional government grant of £113 million, new prudential borrowing of £147.8 million, and new self-finance prudential borrowing of £2.6 million. These new capital spending commitments are essential investments in transformation, in support of our maintaining our assets and critical infrastructure and our council priorities, with significant investment in increasing in-house capacity for children's residential and edge of care and in special educational needs places, including a long overdue new build of the Villarreal School, which I think actually previous administrations didn't prioritise enough. The
Councillor,
new capital
if you can close down, please. Thank
The
you.
new capital expenditure also places significant investment in our highways and bridges infrastructure, 70 million quid going on to that. The financial risks surrounding the high needs deficits have largely been mitigated by the announcements last week, but they still leave us with a circa 8.5 million to 9.5 million in local council taxpayers to pick up the bill. Chair, I would say that this is a banging budget for a new administration, and I think the residents of County Durham will thank us for our fiscal prudence. And with that, I move the MTFP 2627.
Thanks, Councillor. Can I have a second to the reports, please?
Chair, I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Husband.
So, picking on Darren's brilliant report there, I'd like to thank officers for a very comprehensive and
Councillor, you've reserved your right to speak, so obviously you
Whenever
get
this
10
is
minutes as a
Second in the report.
Sorry?
Second in the report. And then
But
I'll
in
reserve the right to
seconding
speak
the
again.
but you've seconded the report, and then you'll be brought in to speak towards the end of the debate. That's having reserved your right to speak.
Right, I will do it that way, that's fine.
Give Councillor, let's change that. Thank you. Before I bring in the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board and open the debate, there is an opportunity for members to ask questions on the proposals outlined in items 9 and 10. If you've already registered to speak and want to make a speech rather than ask a question, please cancel your request to speak at this time and re-register once I open the debate. Are there any questions? If you asked a question on the report, you'll be able to speak in the debate later. Okay. Councillor Mark Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. Got it right this time. Could the Finance Director please confirm that much of the borrowing in the budget is either over long periods of time, such as 30, 40 years, or the lifetime of an asset, that this is standard policy, and that all capital schemes are reviewed regularly before money is actually spent? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may, yep. Well, I could give a long answer, but I think the simple answer is yes. You'll see the capital strategy that is appended to the report, and the Treasury Management Strategy includes our what's called our MRP policy and our standard borrowing terms of 35 to 40 years for infrastructure type investments. But we do sort of vary the length of loans depending on circumstances. So some of the investor save schemes, for instance, are borrowed over 30, 35 years, and we have shorter borrowing periods for things like sort of climate change investments in previous years that are sort of on a shorter asset life. So yes, we do have varying levels of length of borrowing depending on what we're borrowing for and what the asset is that we're investing in.
Thank you, Paul. Right, there's a question now. Councillor Crute? And can I emphasise, Councillor, these are questions, please?
Yeah, I withdrew from the queue, Chairman. My name shouldn't be shown up there. I wanted to
Okay, thank you.
budget.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Chair. Could the Director advise were any other options made available to the administration other than reducing the council tax further following last week's announcement of additional government grant? And will this reduction in council tax make the financial situation worse in 28-29, given that we now have the luxury of a 3-year settlement and we know what the government grants are going to be?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. So members will be aware that after publishing the report for Cabinet, the draft budget proposals, we received the final local government finance settlement last week, and we were allocated an extra £3.7 million of core funding next year. I can confirm the Cabinet did carefully consider the options available to it in light of that additional funding allocation. Those options included whether to delay or defer some of the savings that were proposed to be delivered next year, to invest the additional funding of £3.7 million, or to reduce the council tax requirement. And it was the latter that was the strategy that the Cabinet agreed to adopt, and that's the proposals that are in the report today. So yes, there were options were considered, and the considered view of the Cabinet was to sort of apply a lower reduction in council tax, effectively utilising the £3.7 million of grant rather than generating that from council tax increases, because the original budget proposals were predicated on a 3.1% council tax.
Thank you, Paul.
So there was a second part of the question, wasn't it? You said, does that sort of impact on the wider MTFP? So yes, we got £3.7 million more grant next year that has been used to reduce the council tax. That grant, it's called the Recovery Grant, Uplift Grant, bizarre name. But so it's 3.7. That 3.7 million pound grant grows to around about 4.8 million pound in 27-28, and then, as sort of Councillor Grimes sort of mentioned in moving the report there, it then gets reduced substantially down by 3.5 million pound in 28-29. So the impact on the MTFP is effectively we've used the 3.7 million pound to reduce the council tax requirement next year. We get extra 1.1 million pound in 27-28. We lose 3.5 million of it. So the net effect is our MTFP forecasts are about sort of 2.2, 3.3 million pound worse or higher savings requirement across the MTFP as a result of those decisions. But as I would sort of outline, there is no council tax increases factored in beyond 26-27, and there is a range of sort of transformational savings that the Cabinet will work on and will sort of bring forward as part of the budget proposals in future years.
Thank you, Mr Darby. Councillor Hopgood.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, a question for the officer, if I may. Can I ask, how does this year's savings compare to what we had to make last year with less funding? What were the savings that were made by the administration last year? Just for context.
So the savings that are being factored into the 26-27 budget are sort of just under £15.5 million. The savings that Council agreed in order to be able to balance the budget for 25-26 were £18 million. So it's around about sort of £6 million different, or a few £1 million different.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Another question for the Director. Can you please clarify what are the actual revenue savings built into the budget next year? How many of them relate to decisions that reached in this chamber in February 2025? And how much of that has come from the Reform Doge initiative that we were promised?
So the 26-27 budget includes £12.9 million worth of budget savings. £3.8 million of that was including the MTFP 15 proposals that we considered and agreed in this chamber this time last year, which represents about 30% of the savings in 26-27. In total, the MTFP 16 includes just under £15.5 million of savings across the 4-year period of this MTFP planning period, and £5.7 million of this were included in the MTFP 15 report, which equates to about 36% of the total. What I would say is that the 26-27 budget does also include £2.2 million worth of savings through additional council tax being generated from the changes to the council tax reduction scheme next year, where the support will be capped at 90%, and those proposals were not factored into the MTFP 15 report. So all of the savings agreed, all the savings that were agreed by Council this time last year were reviewed by the current Cabinet and were set out in the reports that we published in September and were consulted on again alongside the new proposals which were set out in the November Cabinet report. We've had no engagement to date with the Reform Doge initiative, so none of those savings in the budget papers today come from that process.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. I've got another question for the Corporate Director. Following the cancellation of their grants, there are over 50 town and parish councils and the City of Durham Charter Trust that will be financially worse off in 2026-27 to a combined total of 694,000, I believe. What was the combined total precept requested by those town and parish councils for 2025-26? And what is the combined total precept requested by the same town and parish councils for 26-27? Hopefully you can find that info for me.
I did anticipate this one might come up. So, in overall terms, the total town and parish council precepts in the current year is 17.1 million. Of that 17.1 million, 11.8 1.851 million is relates to those town and parish councils that were impacted by the decision to remove the grant payments. Next year, the total town and parish precepts are 18.526 million, and of that, 12.764 million relates to those councils that were impacted. So, to answer your question, Councillor Lyons, the increase in precepts for those councils that were affected by the removal of the grant payments next year is 913,000, which is a 7.7% increase on their current level of precept.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yet another question for the Corporate Director. I thank you for your patience. I'm aware that the pressure on adult social care budgets is largely driven by external rates of pay. I note that the national living wage increase this year is 4.1%. Can you confirm what the percentage increase was last year and what the financial difference is between the two figures? Thank you.
Again, I did anticipate that one coming. So, the national living wage increase in April 2025 was 6.7%. That was announced in the November of 2024. The growth that we had to accommodate in the current year's budget in 25-26 was just under £17.9 million of growth, largely linked to that increase in the national living wage from April 2025. The budget growth we've built into the next year's budget for 26-27 is £10 million based on that 4.1% increase in the national living wage. So the growth required next year is around just under £8 million less than the growth that we had to build into the current year's budget because the national living wage increase wasn't as significant next year as what it is in the current year.
Councillor Rowney.
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually answered in a previous question, so I don't need to ask it. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Chair, another question. We will no doubt get into the political discussion shortly about savings. But please can you clarify that when various members of Cabinet quote the capital savings that will be delivered as a result of the review that was undertaken post-election, what are the actual revenue savings and which will affect this budget directly this year?
Thank you, Councillor Martin. That figure is quoted in the report. So, yes, the Cabinet, post the election last year, undertook an extensive review of the capital programme, removed sort of £22 million worth of schemes. The revenue saving as a consequence of that is £720,000, and that's factored into the budgets in 26-27. So that's £720,000 worth of capital finance and revenue costs that we don't need to then accommodate anymore.
Councillor Marshall, Craig Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for the Cabinet, just reading the MTFP. Does the Cabinet agree with me then that 200 SEND places for vulnerable children matter more to our residents than the 200 new solar installations that people wish for across our beautiful county? Thank you.
Does somebody want to respond to that one? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you for your question, Craig. Absolutely. Villarreal School's been asking for a better facility from two governments. First the Conservatives promised it, then Labour promised it, and the money then went to the RAC issue rather than a school that has really, really poor conditions for the poorest children in the county. So yes, this Cabinet did take that into consideration and believed absolutely that that was more important than any solar or any other kind of project that might trump it. Thank you.
We have nobody else registered to ask a question, so I propose we move on to the debate, and we'll invite Councillor John Cook to provide feedback from the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. But before we ask for Councillor Cooke, can I please ask that everybody speak into the microphones at all times, just so everybody can understand what's being said. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, can you hear me all right? Yeah. I'm John Cook. I'm Chair of Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Here to present the feedback from our scrutiny deliberations on the budget and council tax, etc. I think it's important first to mention that scrutiny reflects the proportional representation of this council. So it has all the groups participating. We're never going to agree on how money is going to be raised and spent. What we do is provide in-depth scrutiny of the assumptions made in the budget, and that's what we'd feed back on. So the points I present today represent a balanced and sense-checked overview of the board's deliberations, which took place in October and December of last year and January, February this year, our last meeting being on the 12th of February. The board had robust challenge and debate over the plans, and I'd like to thank the Head of Financial and Commercial Services for the comprehensive way he responded to all of our queries. In regards to the structural finance, scrutiny welcomes the return to a multi-year settlement because this allows the authority to plan with greater certainty, more flexibility, and in some areas more ambition than it's been possible under repeated single-year settlements. It also improves the Council's ability to manage the risks. However, short-term gains do not remove long-standing challenges. Even with an improved settlement, a structural deficit still remains. There is broad consensus that short-term uplifts do not equate to long-term sustainability, and that the revised national formulas may continue to disadvantage high-needs areas such as County Durham. A significant positive must also be recognised in the High Needs Stability Grant and the 90% of eligible dedicated schools grant deficits within the high needs block being covered. This substantially reduces the financial exposure created by long-term special educational needs and disabilities pressures. It does not remove the need for ongoing monitoring, particularly in a multi-year deal with pressures continuing, transport costs or wider provision volatility. There still remains key areas for scrutiny over the coming months and years. In regards to the council tax, scrutiny recognises Cabinet's proposals to reduce the core council tax to 0% with a 1.99% increase to the adult social care precept provides a much needed relief for households still facing cost of living pressures, though views among members were divided about the prudence of doing so. And also, it must be noted, it's contradictory to the government assumptions of maximum council tax increases they would expect councils to provide. 2 points are clear. The proposal sits within the policy direction set by this elected administration, and the Section 151 officer has raised no objections, meaning it meets the tests of legality, prudence and professional acceptability. Scrutiny therefore recognises both the short-term benefits and longer-term risks that continue, and we will continue to monitor closely this within the next years of the medium-term financial plan. Other changes that were noted, in particular the visible service changes, because scrutiny emphasises that visible service changes must be handled carefully and they must shape public perception. And there are several items which are in the report. I'll go through just a couple. Grass cutting changes from a 10-week cycle to a 12-week cycle isn't a removal of the service, and that might also include the additional wildflower meadows in the places that have previously been identified. I have one in my division and it got very positive feedback from residents. Neighbourhood wardens was also mentioned. Unfortunately, there are no redundancies in the picture. The reduction reflects 2 long-term vacancies and 1 retirement, which is definitely an improvement from the proposed headcount reduction of 9 posts we inherited from the previous administration. Green waste charges, these have been increased. It is to cover the service costs that haven't been increased in previous years, and it also includes the cost of an additional collection, which helps us to be able to manage the waste that we do collect.
Mr. Cook, 1 minute.
These may affect public perception, and also mitigation measures and environmental improvements have been intentionally built into the plans. Likewise, with the parish and town council precepts, yes, we've closed that a year earlier than was intended, and that then gives local parish councils and town councils the ability to increase their precepts, as previously just been mentioned. That doesn't increase the cost of the town and parish councils, but rather it puts the cost onto the right column of the balance sheet in your council tax bill, and that creates greater accountability for councils as well. There is some minor geographical differences for where you live, whether you're paying more or less on your parish and town council precepts. But this doesn't actually target any specific protected characteristics, so an equality impact assessment wouldn't be needed in those regards. If it was, it would be for the parish or town council to create.
Council, it's time to close down here.
Thank you, Chair. Members, thank you very much for your attention. The addendum is in the pack, so I hope you enjoy reading that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I will now move on to those registered to speak. Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. Didn't think I'd get in that quick. I'd like to move an amendment to the budget. Officers will be able to present this on the screen. As we've just heard from the Finance Officer, the majority of capital borrowing in the budget is over 30 to 40 years, or over the lifetime of an asset for that matter. So the principle set by this Council over the last decade or more is reaffirmed by this Reform administration, is that the Council will borrow to invest, and indeed in this budget over £100 million of new capital borrowing, most of which doesn't actually save money, but is necessary. So the motion before you is to reinstate the Solar on Capital Buildings project, which was cancelled last year using fake news of kids before windmills. What is very clear now is that this motion does not cost the Council any money. It will save the Council money, and it does not need to happen instead of any funding being spent on children. Furthermore, as with every capital project, its business case is reviewed throughout the period of time before the money actually starts to be spent. That protection is built into this motion. We've had confirmation from the officer earlier that that's what the Council does. I know it will save money. Officers say it can save money. Anyone in their right mind knows this can save money and the right thing to do. So there is no excuse to say you can't afford it, and there's no excuse to say that something else is more important or would be lost. That's a fact. We've heard it from officers as well. If you don't support this motion, the only possible reasons are that you're ideologically opposed to solar panels, and I'm sure we'll come on to someone saying put your hand up if you've got them on your roof, or you're ideologically opposed to the Council saving money. One final point to members of the lead group. It's councillors that run this council with officer support, not party leaders in London. So please make your own mind up. Don't do what your boss in London says. Don't do what Mr. Fake News is no doubt to say. Do what's right for your community, for the people of this county, and support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for this?
Councillor Elizabeth Pears, I second this amendment and reserve the right to speak at the end.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak on this amendment? Councillor Croot, you are registered. Do you want to speak on the amendment? Thanks very much. So there's no anybody else who wants to speak on the amendment? Councillor, you are entitled to speak if you so wish.
Councillor Elizabeth Pears. So I want to support this amendment because it is an investor save, it is self-financing. Business owners are investing in solar panels on their buildings because they know it makes financial sense. Even I heard Reform members have solar panels, not for the environment because they don't believe scientists, so it must be for financial reasons. This amendment makes financial sense. It's less of a risk than relying on volatile oil and gas markets. Even if we started digging for coal and extracting more oil, it still wouldn't make a difference to these oil and gas markets. They are dirty and expensive, and they have to be extracted and exported and transported over and over and over again. But solar panels, put them on a building, and you've got free energy for at least 20 years. Reform want to be reliant on the volatile oil and gas markets because the party is funded by fossil fuel interests.
Just a moment. Can we have quiet, please? Thank you.
They're doing this to line the pockets of their donors and not for the people of County Durham or the good of the county. I urge you to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Grimes has moved with the original budget proposal. You have a right to reply if you so wish before we vote on it.
Chair, we've debated this, I think, many times, actually, this particular issue. I'm really sorry that Councillor Wilkes has such a penchant for solar panels and not a penchant for the children of County Durham. That's his priorities, his prerogative, and I think that tells you all you need to know about the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Councillor. So obviously we're going to go to a vote, please, on this first amendment that's up in front of you. Sorry? Yeah. I'm going to ask the legal officer to explain the procedure.
Thank you, Chair. So as indicated, this will be a recorded vote. So the way in which you vote will appear in the minutes for the meeting. We are voting for the amendment as just moved. So if you're voting in favour, it's 1, 2 against, 3 to abstain. The buzzer will sound when the vote is open. If you press the wrong vote incorrectly, then pressing the right button will correct your vote. And if you have a problem with your handset, please raise it in the air and a member of the team will come and help. That's the vote open.
The vote is now closing. So the vote is now closing. Right, the result of this amendment, for the amendment is 28. Against the amendment is 53, with 1 abstention. So the amendment falls and we go back to the original debate. Thank you. We'll move on. Councillor Croot, you were registered to vote on the original debate.
So I'm speaking on the budget now.
Thank
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Rob Croot for the Blackhall and Heslins Division of Durham County Council. I'm speaking this morning on behalf of the Labour Group. Chair, at recent management board meetings, I've raised concerns about the tone and the downbeat nature of the Cabinet's MTFP and budget reports. And it's almost as if the Council was facing some kind of immediate financial catastrophe from the latest government finance settlement. There also appears to be a sense of naivety from Cabinet members when they've expressed concern that the Council still faced a deficit over the 4-year term of the MTFP, despite a record increase in funding from this government. As far as I'm aware, and that Section 151 Officer Will-Keep was right on this, as far as I'm aware, no local authority has ever had its deficit written off as part of an annual local government finance settlement, and the Council's core spending power has always been predicated on the assumption that council tax will be raised by the maximum amount permissible to fill any gaps. So with that in mind, there's really no reason at all why this Cabinet should see themselves an exception to the rules that the rest of us have had to follow under difficult circumstances for many years. Chair, difficult and unpopular decisions have always been at the heart of budget setting, and we thought that this administration would have known that before the process started last year. And perhaps they're realising now the folly in making promises on council tax 7 months before they know what's in next year's finance settlement. Chair, in reality, the settlement we have this year is an uplifting core grant funding of over £60 million over the next 4 years, and that figure's based on the Cabinet's own assumptions as set out on page 35 of the addenda to the budget papers in front of us this morning. This amount is supplemented by additional £4 million from a carryover of the extended producer responsibility grant, an extra £1 million from the triennial review of the pension fund, and several other grant uplifts set out on page 35 and beyond. And we also heard just last week that the Council's now been handed an additional £3.7 million through an uplift in the recovery grant to help plug a gap in its core spending power. And the benefits of this additional grant in tempering the Cabinet's initial intention to raise council tax by 3.1% shouldn't be overlooked nor underestimated. In addition, it should be acknowledged as a significant benefit that the government's agreed to underwrite 90% of the council's dedicated schools grant deficit, because if that deficit was to fall onto the council's balance sheet when the statutory override ends in 2028, the council would have found itself in section 114 territory, meaning it would be bankrupt by another name, and that external operatives would be brought in to run the council in place of elected members. That government lifeline measure alone has removed a potentially existential threat to this council and dozens more like it up and down the country. Chair, in comparison to the previous 14 years of punishing Tory austerity that have systematically stripped hundreds of millions out of this council, our communities and its public services, this Cabinet now finds itself with a relative embarrassment of riches alongside a 3-year funding settlement that gives the Cabinet considerable flexibility with a number of newfound options when balancing the budget and deciding on council tax demands, service cuts and borrowing levels. In recognising the significant increase in funding for the Council this year, we urge the Cabinet to make the right choices on behalf of the residents of County Durham who were promised and understandably expected an extended period of respite from the recent generation of senseless ideologically driven cuts to public services. However, we don't accept that the Cabinet has taken the right approach by increasing council tax levels, increasing the amount of cuts and introducing an additional debt burden of £150 million in borrowing on top of last year's total. And it hasn't gone unnoticed that this was a level of debt that Reform explicitly criticised on their election materials less than a year ago. Reform's promise to cut taxes had already been breached last year when the Council dragged thousands of vulnerable families into the council tax regime for the first time by removing the safety net that we'd always provided through the local council tax reduction scheme. But to make matters worse, they're now proposing to increase council tax for the rest of us, despite promises made just a few months ago to keep taxes down. And there's a salient point to be made here. It's not possible to increase taxes down. And the people of County Durham won't fall for semantics when the cold hard facts are staring them in the face when they pick up their council tax bills from the doormat in a few weeks' time. If the Cabinet's budget is agreed this morning, they'll break another 3 of its implied election pledges. First, by increasing the council debt burden. Second, by increasing fees and charges. And finally, by making additional cuts to services when other options are available. In addition, reforms also removing in one lump sum all local authority funding from our local town and council parish councils, forcing members of those councils, through no fault of their own, to either slash services, increase their council tax precepts, or a mix of both. Chair, this is the old Tory tactic of passing the buck down the line. We thought that practice had died out with the Tory party, but for some reason it appears to be alive and well in today's reform, and we leave others to decide for themselves how that's come about. For all the reasons I've set out this morning, we can't, in all conscience, support this budget, and we urge all other members across the authority to join us, including Reform's backbenchers, many of whom to this point have been happy to put the blame, and rightly so, on their own Cabinet members. Now's your chance to demonstrate whether your loyalty is to the Cabinet or to the people of County Durham. Chair, the people who elect us to serve them deserve better than council tax increases, higher fees and charges, further cuts to services, increased borrowing and breaches of promises made to the electors less than a year ago, especially when this council has been handed a lifeline in the form of a significant increase in funding for the first time in a generation, and when the Cabinet has the comparative luxury of a 3-year funding settlement that gives them a range of alternative options, allows them valuable flexibility for the first time in setting the budget over a 3-year term. This isn't what the people wanted, Chair. It isn't what they expected, and it certainly isn't what they voted for last May. We won't support it, and we urge the rest of the members across the floor of all colours to follow suit. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crute. Councillor Martin.
Chair, I'd like to move an amendment to the budget. I'll just pause for a moment while it's displayed. In essence, I want to give £10,000 to every single county councillor to be spent on highways safety measures. Highway safety is quickly becoming the #1 issue I receive complaints about. It's a topic that keeps being raised by residents, coming up in local parish council meetings again and again and again. Our views often differ with highways officers' professionals' opinions, who tell us there's nothing wrong, while the reality is, when residents open their front doors, they see danger directly in front of them. This is why this issue is so pertinent. We live with these roads day in, day out, seeing all those potential accidents, near misses, casualties waiting to happen. Previously, councillors had the ability to proactively take action on this, utilising our neighbourhood budgets to implement reasonable changes. But the cost of implementing such changes has increased dramatically. Neighbourhood budgets have been frozen for a long time, and now they're being cut. We lack any direct power or finances to provide basic highway safety improvements to our communities. And that's why I'm proposing this amendment today. This is going to be funded from the money that local networks haven't spent over the last year. I think only Cabinet know what will eventually happen with local networks, but funding that should have been spent on our communities has been sat in the council coffers. And what always seems to be the case when money doesn't get spent, it gets absorbed back into the centre of the council. So to prevent this from happening and to ensure communities don't lose out, this amendment will ensure everyone feels the benefits of it being equally distributed across councillors. I want to make it really clear, I am in no way am I proposing widespread, rampant 20-mile-per-hour zones. As someone who lives in the area of Chelsea Street adjacent to Birtley, I've seen and experienced the unpopular, unnecessary, unintended consequences of the 20-mile-per-hour main road that runs through the town. There is a perception that Durham County Council are extremely light touch when it comes to highway safety. We need to make this misconception, we need to get rid of this misconception by taking strong action on this matter today. Council, back the amendment and show residents that we are hearing, listening and acting on their highways safety concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair, and reserve the right to speak should a reservation be needed.
Thank you. And we have a series of councillors who wish to speak, but you do realise you will be speaking on the amendment, not on the debate regarding the full budget. So I call on the first one is Councillor Boron. Do you wish to speak on this? No. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Chair, and I do wish to speak on the budget later as well. I think this is a very good amendment. In fact, I wish I'd thought of it myself. I do have a question at the end of the agenda paper about what's happened to local networks, and this basically brings up the issue of what's happened to the money, their capital budget, not a lot. I support this because it's probably 2 years ago now, there was a scheme outlined outside Cudderston Primary School that was for a 20-mile-an-hour limit plus additional road markings. The cost then was £14,000, probably gone up to close to 20 now. Cudderston is but one of like a dozen villages in my very large division. It's beyond my ability to fund that from members' capital allocations, so I'd very much support this. If you haven't got a scheme, you don't need to spend and waste the money, but if you have got a scheme that needs doing, as I have, this amendment would enable that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Hunt, do you wish to speak on this amendment? Okay. Councillor Neil, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Alex Neil, Langley and Esh Division. Across County Durham, residents are raising to their county councillors, to local parish councillors and to the police about regular issues with road safety, speeding and dangerous driving. In my area alone, there are a number of such issues. We have speeding on Langley Park Front Street, an unsafe 60-mile-an-hour speed limit at the entrance to the new Birch Tree Grove estate, and no safe street crossings in Esh, an unsafe 40-mile-an-hour speed limit in Quebec and Wilkes Hill, a dangerous crossroad near Cornsay Village, and Cornsay Colliery alone has a speeding problem through the main route, 2 dangerous crossroads, and to cap it all off, no true safe crossings through the whole village. Every week, it feels more and more issues are being raised to me on the doorstep or in my inbox. Residents are scared. They are scared that their kids can't play safely by the road. They are scared that they could get hit, and some have. And most importantly, they are scared that one day someone will tragically lose their life in such an accident. We need local councillors to be able to react to residents' concerns and unsafe roads with quick and decisive action. Without funding and a scheme to use it effectively, councillors cannot react in this way. We cannot protect our residents as best we could, and we cannot fix the key problems that our residents care about. I will make a final plea. Back this amendment, back both your residents and mine, by providing this funding to protect them and save lives on the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Quinn, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
I do, Chair, actually. Thank you. Chair, the definition of political grandstanding is the act of using public discourse, committee hearings or media opportunities to perform for an audience rather than to engage in substantive policy making. Now, Chair, contrary to popular belief, we operate an open-door policy. Councillor Potts, have you ever knocked on the door of the Cabinet Office and been denied access? No. Now, I know what you're thinking, Chair. That makes sense. He's one of our own political group. Well, I'm now going to put over to the opposition. And when I say the opposition, on this occasion, Chair, I'm actually only speaking about the Liberal Democrats. As Councillor Bell alluded to, he was not aware of this amendment either. Councillor Neil, you have asked for meetings with the leadership. Were you denied said meeting? Councillor Stead, I believe you've enjoyed a cup of tea in the Cabinet room during full council with us. In fact, not 2-3 weeks ago, Councillor Wilkes lobbied me, ironically, in the lobby about something. Chair, even the opposition... Pardon? Not yet. Chair, even the leader of the opposition herself has requested meetings with the leader. She's knocked on the door. Never once has she been denied access to our cabinet room or indeed a meeting. Unlike this amendment, Chair, we had a briefing on Friday where we were explicitly told by officers that under no circumstances were we to have foresight of this amendment. That doesn't seem very fair to me, Chair, when we're so open, not very transparent, Chair. How, Chair, can anybody in good conscience vote on a £1.5 billion budget when this is the first time we're seeing it? We have absolutely no clue how this will affect anything else within the budget. Chair, our budget has been through scrutiny. It has been through the proper channels. All they had to do was come and have a conversation with us. Well, unfortunately, Chair, I have no choice but to not vote for said amendment, and I will be voting for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crout, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't aware of the details of this amendment, but on the face of it, it looks like it makes sound common sense. Now, many years ago, when we had the neighbourhood budget, we used to have an additional £7,000 as a highway budget that was set aside. Now, that was subsumed into a central pot by a previous administration. I'll have to claim the Fifth Amendment rather than name that administration. But to put this money back into the communities, who better is it to identify the schemes that need doing than local members who are active and visible in their own communities? I think it makes sound common sense. If the neighbourhood budgets and the Small Communities Fund have made a real difference in our communities, I think this would follow in exactly the same way. You know, we know best where the problems are in our own communities, and I think it would save a lot of pressure on the individual cabinet members as well, so nobody's having to knock the door down or drink the tea and coffee. If we had some control over what element of that budget went into our own local areas. So I'm fully in support of this amendment, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. I can't believe someone's talking about public grandstanding after listening to the Deputy Leader of this Council for the past 10 months. So, I mean, it would seem to me that Councillor Quinn is saying the only reason he's not supporting this is because he wasn't told about it far enough in advance. Now, I don't need time to support something that I've just read 6 times while he was talking. It's very clear. There's money not allocated to anything which should be spent in our communities, which was put there to spend in our communities originally. I fail to see any reason not to support this, unless Councillor Quinn has been told by the Leader and Deputy Leader he's not allowed to. So I would urge everybody on all sides of the chamber to support this, to support getting some money spent in your community to make roads safer. And if not, kind of stand up and explain why you're not going to do that, and explain to your residents after this meeting why you're not going to put money in when it's sat there not allocated to anything.
Councillor McGuinness.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reply on behalf of highways and traffic. You know, £10,000, the average scheme will probably cost, say, speed humps around £40,000. So that budget that you're suggesting is nowhere near sufficient to actually implement a significant engineering scheme. Equally, the local networks budget, this is work in progress. It will be coming out. I believe that the budgets will roll over, so the local networks will have more money going forward, and the councillors will obviously have a say in their area how that money is spent. From my side, and the instruction that I've given to officers, which I 100% stand by, is that road safety and traffic changes must be data-driven. We will listen to the community, absolutely, but we need the hard facts and the data to back up spending money due to the exact costs that I've just mentioned. We need to prioritise where there are issues, and safety on roads is very much a perception. I work with experts in traffic who've worked in that industry for 20, 30 years. They know what they're doing. Durham roads are safe.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin. I know it's probably something's very funny down there, but if you'd like to share it with the rest of the members, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. Just the comment about County Durham's roads being safe. As a councillor, like I said, it's the #1 issue that my residents come to. I think it is absolutely laugh out loud that a member of
Point
Cabinet
order,
can
Chair.
say this.
I believe this is a speech. Has he not already spoke, Chair?
Just one. He was actually answering my question, Councillor. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just laugh out loud. It's a big concern, and Cabinet shouldn't belittle residents who it is at the top of their forefront of their issues.
Thank you.
Can I reply, please, Chair?
Yes.
We're not belittling residents in any way, and there is a set process to organise speed, traffic surveys. So all parish councils, all town councils, all councillors can pay £500 or work with the local police to get speed surveys or traffic surveys as needed. When they have the data, we will then act, absolutely.
Thanks for that clarification, Councillor. Councillor Sexton. Councillor Sexton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You're going to find this bizarre, but I'm actually going to... Oh, shall I try a different one?
I think it's working now.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to actually... You're going to be surprised. I'm going to actually agree with Councillor Martin that his residents do open the door and do see danger. It just happens to be it has to be data driven. Can you imagine all of that money potentially wasted on schemes that people might not want? It sounds good, but we can't afford to put money into schemes like that without that data, as Councillor McGuinness has already said. So that's why I'll be voting down this amendment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Malloy.
Thank you, Chair. On the face of it, I'm supportive of this amendment. However, as it's already been alluded to from the other side of the room, would this actually be cost effective and bringing in any safety rules measures, i.e. the cost? We've got no detail of the average cost up here to say what would the cost be of implementing a 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction. Would that exceed the £10,000? And if a lot of these road safety measures that came about were exceeding of that amount, it may be a waste of money. Also, if this was passed today, this amendment, what effect would that have on the cost of the council tax come first today? I'm still open either way, swaying on the for the amendments. It's just the two little niggly points I've got that need iron out for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lyons, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
I certainly do. Thank you, Chair. So I'll hopefully answer your question as well, Councillor Bell, at the same time regarding the local networks money. So basically the money will roll over, and the way we are changing the local network structure, I would think would benefit all 98 councillors, because they will all decide where the money's spent. So I would be voting against this amendment and let the local networks, when we run them out from the beginning of April, to decide where their £200,000 is going to be spent. Because like you say, it might not need to be done in Chelsea Street, Spenny or Durham City, for example, but it could be used somewhere else. So for me, I'd be voting against this amendment and making your own mind up of where that extra £100,000 for your local area network might go. But also to answer your question as well, Councillor Bell, I may as well do it now, is that area action partnerships to local networks were agreed by... All right, okay. So yeah, I would vote against it because you are getting your £100,000 network money very, very shortly, so it'll be 200,000.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. Councillor Elmer? Sorry, Jonathan Elmer.
Thank you, Chair. In my division, there's a real serious issue in relation to the lack of things like dropped curbs, enabling disabled people to move around more easily, and blister paving in particular that helps sensory impaired people just be safe when they're walking around pavements. It's a real problem, but what I would say is that these sorts of measures, they are highways improvement and safety related measures. They're not that expensive, actually, and the sort of money we're talking about here could actually make a valuable contribution to that sort of thing. So I would just ask that all members look at this amendment on its own merits right now. Politics is adversarial. We all play party political games with these things. We shouldn't be when there's something that is clearly of benefit. I mean, this is the sort of thing that we ought to be thinking of as a free vote, frankly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shulman, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes, I do. The problem is not the roads or anything, it's the drivers. If there was more enforcement of the laws, there wouldn't be any problem, so this amendment is not necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Woodhouse.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Woodhouse, Castle Eden, Passfield Councillor. On paper, this looks a really, really good amendment and proposal, but as Councillor Croot will know, we've got a speed calming project going on in Hutton Henry. Now, that's been raised by previous councillors and the local residents. That's at the minute at £30,000. That needs to go up to make this happen. We're now looking at £40,000 to £45,000 to put that in place. So £10,000 looks good on paper, but will not make a dent. I've got 3 or 4 different areas where I'd love to put speed calming measures in, but I can't do it because it's £40,000. £10,000 won't make a dent in one area. So how am I meant to help all my areas with this? It looks good on paper, but it's not well thought of, and they haven't looked at the costs to implement these measures into the situation. So I will be against this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sean Healy, representing DNS Division. On the sound of it, it does sound a good motion until we look at the facts of costs. I have in front of me some of the costs, for example. For a single dropped curb in front of a house, you're looking at a bill of between £1,000 to £2,500. Allowing for that being the cost of a single dropped curb, the £10,000 allowance, although very laudable as an idea, would actually make no difference in a division. It's simply not enough to make a difference. I know that road safety is an issue, but what Councillor Sherman made the point of, maybe we should focus more on the enforcement of traffic controls, maybe more speed cameras. But, you know, this simply isn't enough to make a difference. It could possibly pay for a few houses to have dropped curbs to help people park their cars. It wouldn't even pay for a single pedestrian crossing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. The key point seems to me has already been made, and it is summarised rather well, I think, by a fridge magnet that I have in my kitchen, which says, "In God we trust. All others must bring data." We don't have any data, so we can't make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor. There's nobody else registered to speak, so Councillor Scott, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm speaking to second this motion. I'm very surprised by some of the comments made by councillors, but I will highlight Councillor Sexton's statement that councillors don't know what their residents want. Well, that might be true of him as he crossed the floor so early into his tenure, but it's not true for everybody else. I know that this is something that concerns residents right across the county, and these are the very people that Reform claim to care so much about. Any councillor who doesn't vote for this is disregarding the concerns of the people of Durham. In very simple terms, we have an amendment here before us that has no impact on council tax, has a massive impact on residents and how they feel the council takes care of their concerns. An amendment that has the potential to save children's lives, that can be added into other neighbourhood budget funding to make things happen. And for those of us who've been on this council for quite a number of years, we're very knowledgeable about how much things cost. And the notion that £1.2 million is not enough to have an impact on anybody's life is frankly a nonsense. So I invite all colleagues across the chamber to vote for this very sensible and pragmatic amendment to the budget, a one which everybody would be delighted, I am sure, in County Durham to support.
Thank you, Councillor.
Point of personal expression, Chair, please. Yeah, I waited courteously to the end to Elizabeth finished. I didn't say that councillors didn't know what the residents want, Councillor Scott, at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Grimes, you do have the right to reply to this amendment.
Chair, I'm just rising to suggest that there must be a form of collective amnesia on that side of the chamber, because the last time I checked, I believe the joint administration was led by the Liberal Democrats. Where were those schemes then, right? Why are their residents not enjoying the delights of 20-mile-per-hour roads and all of these other schemes and all the rest of it? The facts of the matter are that there is absolutely nothing, not one thing, that stops the local area networks from being able to actually support these types of schemes. The local area networks are going to be rolled out, as Councillor Lyons will set out in her response to Councillor Bell, and it'll be carried over and ring-fenced for those local area networks. Though that funding will not be lost. This £10,000 per councillor will amount to absolutely nothing, as set out by Highways and the experts that sit behind Highways. This isn't a reform position. This is an officer position. Are those on that side of the chamber suggesting that they doubt the advice from experts who actually might not have been on this council as long as some of the Liberal Democrats have been, but I would rather they've got a damn sight more done in that time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no more questions, so we will be going to the vote regarding this amendment. I ask for the legal officer to explain.
Thank you, Chair. So it will be the same process as before. You are voting on the second amendment as moved by Councillor Martin. If you vote in favour, it's number 1, 2 against, 3 to abstain. If you press the wrong button, pressing the right one will correct your vote. Please wait for the buzzer to sound to indicate the vote's open. And once again, the way in which you vote will be recorded in the minutes for the meeting. Thank you. Could I ask for members to stay in the room until we close the vote, please, just so we know who's voting? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll close the vote now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. For this amendment, we have 29. Against the amendment, we have 54. There are no abstentions. The amendment falls and we go back to the original debate. It's an original debate now. So I'm assuming everybody will have taken in the vote there. I call on Councillor Boron if he wishes to speak regarding the original debate.
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues, in 2026, when we talk about the economy in County Durham, we must start with realism and honesty. Many working families are still feeling the weight of the last few years. Prices rose faster than wages, public services are stretched, and our residents who did everything right worked hard, paid into the system, played by the rules. The reality is the communities we represent for Durham County Council still feel like they're running just to stand still. County Durham has always been proud of its working people. Our history is one of the reasons communities that stuck together through industrial change, austerity and economic decline. But the resilience of the people we represent should not be mistaken for endless patience. Admiration for coping is not what residents want. They are asking for economic change. Change that finally gives something back. Secure jobs, investment that reaches the former villages and town centres, not stopping at city boundaries. Our younger generations need apprenticeships that lead to real careers and jobs. We need reliable transport services and high streets to feel alive again, which means recognising that economic renewal is about headline projects alone. We need ordinary families to be heard, safe, steadier and more hopeful, and for them to see change. We have 26 million of new investment, every pound being invested to strengthen local communities. We are investing in our schools, creating 200 additional SEND places. Investments into our road networks, every partnership we build to create opportunities that can be seen with real impact.
1 minute, Councillor.
Change. Because when investment leaves the county, working people pay the price. When we grow local businesses, train local workers and keep investing in our towns and villages, it is for the good of everyone. Our job as councillors is to make sure recovery is not something residents just read about, but something they live with. So I support these budget proposals, and I'd like to say business who are looking to invest, we are very much so open for business and always will be as a reformed council. We certainly can't rely on the Labour government to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hunt.
Chair, if it's all right, can I stay seated? I've got a bit of a bad hip.
Of course.
Firstly, I'd like to say thanks to Paul and all the officers involved in the detailed work to bring the budget report to Council. There's some critical areas in children and young people's services which are mentioned in the report. In terms of our statutory responsibility to find suitable and stable homes for children in care, this spend presents significant risks to the Council. It is an issue for Durham, but it's also an issue regionally and across the whole country, with increasing numbers of vulnerable children who need care and the spiralling costs of private providers who are profiteering from the market. This has been recognised and is subject to national reform. This administration declared a care emergency. As part of the care emergency, we are concentrating our efforts on our statutory duties. The action being taken as part of the Durham Cares Sufficiency Strategy is mitigating around £31 million of budget pressures in this area, and the MTFP 16 proposals include significant capital investment to increase in-house residential capacity and expand our edge of care facilities to help further mitigate the pressures to the budget. We want to intensive support in early. We want to get intensive support in early to prevent family breakdown and children in need to come into our care. We have both local, in-house provision and need external providers who charge us a fair price. In terms of the special educational needs, I recognise that by the end of this year, there is a forecast of 39.7 million deficit in the high needs block, which will grow significantly over the next few years. On the 9th of February, the government announced that they would write off up to 90% of the cumulative deficit up to the 31st of March 2026, and then up to 90% of the annual deficit thereafter. However, uncertainty remains as how the remaining 10% plus will be accounted for, and as the timing and content of the white paper which will outline the reforms. I am thrilled that the work of this administration have done to expand SEND provision, with £26 million investment on a new build school in Villarreal. £35.5 million investment in special educational school provision, including a circa £13.5 million investment in new facilities at the former Findoon secondary site. The previous Horndale infant site has also been converted, and an extended site of Evergreen Special School given additional primary special school places for children in the south of the county. As part of our declared care emergency, we have made a commitment. Thank you, Chair. We have made a commitment as a Cabinet to invest in the services that are vital to our communities, and we are delivering that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Thanks very much. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. To speak on the budget. It's a shame Councillor Grimes has just got up and left. He must have read my mind. Napoleon Bonaparte famously valued look in his generals, often asking, I know he's a good general, but is he lucky? Or sometimes translated as, I'd rather have a lucky general than a good one, when considering promotions. Councillor Grimes and the broader administration have indeed been lucky. He has had several windfalls prior to this budget. Pension fund contributions down, extended producer responsibility grant up, and last Monday a further £3.745 million boost from government. The question is now, having been lucky, does this budget spend it wisely? Given the MTFP gap we face of 45 million, and history suggests that this gap will only go up, I do believe that the responsible thing to do would have been to use this 3.7 million as a down payment on those future savings targets. The cost of spending this on council tax reduction this year, this 3.7 million, over the MTF period is almost 10 million, because you've lost it year after year, and there is also a compounding effect to the tax base. That 45 million gap is a big amount of savings to find. The new administration inherited a savings pipeline, but through transformation they now have to build their own. For the sake of our residents, I hope they succeed without having to make severe cuts to public services. As I've said at scrutiny, I'm unhappy with the self-financing borrowing capital deletions done at September's Cabinet, when the financial outlook facing the Council was much bleaker, and these should have been revisited. For example, the deletion of 5.7 million self-financed borrowing for the South Church Enterprise Park seems to me to run counter to last month's motion to reindustrialise County Durham. Other concerns include the 5% charge on capital schemes, neighbourhood schemes from members managed by the Council. What is management? Is this going to be a top slice of our members' budget?
1 minute, Councillor.
There are many good items in budget, not time to list them all. I do welcome Cabinet's decision to remove HWRCs from the threat of closure. I'm sure we've all heard residents say, all I get from my council tax is the roads and bins emptied, and if you take away HWRCs, people will be angry. With approaching 2/3 of our budget being spent on adult and children's social care, we risk becoming little more than a welfare agency. To conclude, given that every 1% on the pay bill equates to 1% on the council tax, unless we receive more government support in future years than they are saying they're going to give us, big rises in council tax down the road are inevitable. So for me, on balance, a lucky budget, but not a wise one.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lyons.
Thanks, Chair. So to discuss on the budget, I just wanted to clarify just some things on the local town and parish council grants that everyone's so keen to talk about over there. I think it's very important to say that only 56 of the 110 town and parish councils across the county, along with the City of Durham Charter Trust, actually receive any money from the council. How's that fair for all of the other town and parish councils across the county? What about all of those who aren't in a town or parish, for example, Crook, Concert, all of them? Is that fair that residents are paying to give free money out? I don't think so. I did contact CEDALC and actually had a meeting with all of the town and parish councils, and I said I would go along and see where they're spending the money, see if we can make some efficiencies. There was only 4 invited us, but never mind. I would completely think that it's fair for everybody if we remove the grant immediately. After all, you were just reducing it. Let's get rid of it. Regarding the local council tax reduction scheme, it is fair, and this council's already agreed, so I don't think we need to reflect that with making anybody pay any more than that they should in paying 10%. And to go to that, town and parish councils will actually be better off because people are paying more council tax. That's all I need to say on the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Paul Darby and his team. I think you've earned your money today, Paul. There's no doubt about that. I'd also like to congratulate this administration on the presentation of this balanced budget. Bear with me here, Chair. When I got up this morning at my house that is taxed, I got in the shower and the gas used to heat my shower is some of the highest taxed on the planet. Unfortunately, I'm not fortunate enough to be able to afford solar panels. I got in my car, started it, again, the fuel used to run that, taxed to the high heavens. Driving along the road, which is also taxed to death. Believe me when I say I pay a lot of road tax, Chair. I get to work, in which my income is taxed. Every single aspect of our lives is taxed. We currently have the highest tax burden since the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Chair, we have absolutely no control over 99% of these taxes. But fortunately, we do have control over one of these taxes. Can anybody guess what that is? Council tax. There we go, guys. Chair, we got elected on a very clear mandate. One of them is lower taxes, where we can. We could have chose to keep the high taxes, as Councillor Bell alluded to, but we made the conscious effort to pass these savings onto the taxpayer. These are political decisions. These are the decisions we chose. We are honouring our pledge to the people that voted us in. Now, I appreciate, Chair, this isn't a lot of money. It's only a few pounds a week, but them few pounds a week make a big difference. And like Councillor Bell alluded to, we lose the compound interest, but likewise for the residents, they lose the compound in interest on it. Chair, the amendment has been voted down. The opposition have a very clear choice. They can do the right thing and vote for the lowest tax rise in well over a decade, or they can use this opportunity for some more political grandstanding. With respect, Chair, this is one of the easiest budgets as opposition I think they've ever had. We've done all the hard work. All you have to do is vote for what's right. Vote for lower taxes. Unless Councillor Wilkes has told you you're not allowed to do that.
1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I encourage all members to vote in favour of this budget. And, Chair, I would also like to remind members, including Councillor Croot, there is no alternative budget proposed here. The amendments, you didn't even yourself provide an amendment to the budget. How can anybody vote on something, vote down something just for the point of political grandstanding? Chair, I'll never know. What I'll leave you on this, though, when you vote reform, you get reform. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lyons. Councillor Lyons, you're speaking on behalf of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Chair. Chris Lyons, Sedgefield Division, and as you say, speaking on behalf of the Durham County Council Independent Group. First of all, thank you, Paul, and your team for the superhuman efforts to bring this budget to Council today. I don't know anyone in this chamber who relishes putting up council tax, and I haven't had a conversation with any councillor or officers since I was first elected who thinks that this tax is fit for purpose. But until a national government is prepared to grasp the nettle and change it, it's the tax that we've got, and this council needs to use it prudently or the consequences could be very serious. The budget proposals presented today make that abundantly clear. A widening of the financial gap for this council during the MTFP period to 44 million is indeed very serious. It's a very scary prospect for a future administration and should make the current administration pause for thought. Instead, decisions are being made now that appear to be very short-sighted and will create what could be insurmountable financial challenges for this council in future years. Meanwhile, there's a narrative being pushed in certain places that this administration's council tax proposals are somehow unprecedented. That's nonsense, of course. The Labour-run council didn't put up council tax for 3 years in the early 2010s when there was an opportunity to ease the burden on residents. And only 4 years ago, the joint administration didn't put up core council tax. This was in the context of the added challenge that that administration faced due to the government only providing single-year settlements. And it was done without cutting services and while continuing to invest in building our economy and improving highways and sustaining maximum support for the poorest people in County Durham. Now, despite the luxury of receiving a 3-year settlement, the current administration appears to be pursuing ideology over fiscal responsibility or fairness to try and score a PR point, while at the same time cutting services and reducing support for the poorest residents. I mean, personally, I wish all politicians would stop using council tax as a football. I took part in Sedgefield's Shrove Tuesday ball game yesterday, and I've got the grazes and bruises to show for that. I don't bounce as well as I used to, it's fair to say. But that was gentle at times compared to the way the football was treated. The mob treated the football was gentle compared to some of how we use council tax in this chamber. And I wish that would change. Given how much of what we can do is dependent on decisions made in Westminster, we should double efforts to lobby the government for a root and branch review of council tax and a properly fresh and fair approach to taxation. I'm not holding my breath that this will happen, but I think it should. As for the proposals before us today, this administration was gifted opportunities to help the poorest in our county, but has spurned them to pursue a headline instead. A 3-year settlement provides the kind of financial certainty that hasn't existed for many years. And then there's last week's extra funding boost. As I stated, the administration could have used this to, in the short term at least, help individuals and communities, but chose not to. The proposed changes to the local council tax reduction scheme and grants to town and parish councils have been presented as savings, which have allowed the administration to limit the council tax rise for next year. But the truth is that the burden is still being passed on to residents in the form of council tax. Reducing the LCTR cap to 90% produces a saving of just over 2 million, assuming that it can be collected. And the immediate phasing out of the town and parish council grants saves 694,000. However, over 50 town and parish councils that are now going to be worse off have requested precepts to a combined total of 913,000, more for the current year than the previous year, as they scramble to protect local services, community centres, groups and events, all vital for those places. That 2 million and the 913,000 is all council tax that our residents have to pay. And the total is the equivalent of essentially an extra percentage point on the overall council tax increase. However, those sums of council tax won't be levied evenly across the whole county. They will be directly taken from the least well-off in society and indirectly from households in over 50 specific communities, many of which are also in the least prosperous areas of County Durham, with residents facing the greatest financial challenges. This administration had a very clear opportunity to pursue a different course. Presented with a bonus of several £1 million by the government, the administration could have chosen to sustain financial support for the poorest in our county and allow town and parish councils more time to prepare for the phasing out of the grant. Instead, the administration has chased an ideologically driven headline that hides the truth, instead of fairness or indeed financial prudence. Because of all of this, we cannot support this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Neil. Councillor Alex Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to begin very briefly by actually congratulating the Leader of the Council and his Cabinet for all of the things they have actually done well. And before anybody gets anxious on this side of the chamber, I'm not preparing to walk across. Don't worry. So what have they done well? Well, they've been very, very good at inheriting a good position. They have inherited a great number of cost-saving measures from the Liberal Democrat-led joint administration, and surprise, surprise, they kept the vast majority of these in place. But what other effectiveness have you shown? Well, you've been very effective at saying yes to taking money from Westminster, placed right on your lap at just the right time. But with all these lucky breaks and generous settlements, he has still been incredibly effective at breaking his party's election pledges. His party and the national leader, or should I say owner of that party, pledged before the election that council tax would freeze, potentially even reduce. His party pledged cuts to unnecessary and wasteful areas of spending, which would allow the council not only to freeze council tax, but to improve the services provided. Instead, all that has been proposed are further cuts to necessary services, not just the efficiency savings that they promised. I wonder where it all went wrong. Was it perhaps that in reality this council didn't spend excessive amounts of money on net zero projects? Was it that the Reform Party didn't realise they couldn't sack staff for working from home or cut salaries for high-performing and overworked council staff? Or perhaps all this just comes down to one very simple fact. The Reform Party have overpromised, and now residents are seeing that those promises are collapsing all around them. For councillors on the Reform side of this chamber, your residents put you here. They thought they were getting a good deal.
1 minute.
A reduced council tax bill and an improvement of public services on the back of slashing wasteful spending. If you want to keep your promises, there is a simple solution. Vote against this budget. Vote against a bad deal for residents in County Durham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Councillor Bellingham. Dawn Bellingham.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dawn Bellingham, Horden and Dean House. I'd just like to set the record straight if I can. The word cut was used on the doorstep, I'm sure with a lot of campaigning on this side of the House. But it related to we were going to cut waste in our council budgets. And I promised all the residents at that time what I would do is find out where their money was being spent as they were paying the second highest council tax in County Durham. That's exactly what I've done. As a parish councillor for Horden North as well, the initial shock of the removal of the grant was looked closely with all of the parish councillors, and they realised at that time they would have to cut the cloth with regards to how they're going to manage their own budgets. So these savings, in my opinion, are not going to have a negative impact on the residents of Horden, because as I say, they're going to have to cut their own cloth. This is what I promised, and it is a positive start to helping our most vulnerable by realigning the budget and making sure the social care and the adult care is looked at more than any sort of net zero. And then that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown, Howard Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Paul and his team for all the overtime they've put in to get this together. A lot of what I'm going to say reflects on what Councillor Quinn said, unfortunately. But it gives me great pleasure to speak in favour of this budget. Apart from complaining for complaining's sake, our so-called more experienced opposition have not been able to produce a credible alternative budget. Yet one of their councillors has said we should vote against this one. If we vote against this one, what have we got left? Nothing. This budget is to benefit the residents of Durham. You remember them? They're the people who overwhelmingly voted for reform in May, to be different and to be proactive. This budget proves that their vote was not a wasted vote, unlike possibly other areas. Apart from concentrating on fairness, this budget makes good our promise to make care and children a priority. With a 0% rise in council tax, it shares the financial progress we have made in 10 months with our residents, and not just on a few dubious projects. This sharing of good administration, as Councillor Quinn says, is our political decision, and long may it last. We are right. We are true to those many thousands who voted reform. We will give you reforms to benefit Durham residents. Using a favourite saying of Councillor Quinn, no ifs, no buts, we will do it. Although I've seen a number of big buts from the other side. I support this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. Look, this budget fails to invest in schemes which would actually save money. We've just seen Reform Councillor vote against solar panels, which would have saved thousands of pounds a year from year one. Councillor Lyons, this budget is increasing town and parish council precepts in a single year instead of over a number of years. Presumably, if it's unfair to give these councils money, then it's also unfair to provide places like Crook with services free of any parish precept. So I presume Reform are going to parish the whole county. This budget is cutting frontline services like litter pickers, reducing grass cutting and much more. It's whacking up parking charges for residents to park outside their own homes by a staggering 40%. It's whacking up parking charges for landlords, retailers, shopkeepers by 33% to park near their businesses. It's hiking garden waste charges by over 18% for residents, 5 times inflation. Reform councillors have voted against funding for road safety because they think it's not enough. That's an illogical bonkers argument like refusing a pay rise. Councillor Hunt refers to child services and the care emergency. Chair, hitting the poorest in our county with hundreds of pounds of council tax rises will directly impact the poorest children in this county. Where we help 2,800 children get £400 of free school meals, Reform are hitting their parent or parents with hundreds of pounds of council tax rises in places like Hordern, Councillor Bellingham. Lower taxes, Councillor Quinn. It's not lower taxes, it's massive tax hikes for the poorest. When you vote Reform, you better not be poor because they're fleecing you with this budget. When you do your garden, it's an 18% tax hike. When you park your car, it's a 40% tax hike. Now, I'm sure you'll keep the fake news flowing, but you don't have enough wool to pull over everyone's eyes, and the residents of this county will see it. No ifs and no buts.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one point. I'm the councillor for Crook, and I can assure you we're not getting a parish. Councillor Greer. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Chair. The sound of the horn a few minutes ago was the sound of the public cheering this budget on, by the way. Chair, we propose a council tax uplift of just 1.99%, limited solely to the adult social care precept, as we've talked about, with a 0% rise in the core council tax. At 1.99%, this is below the inflation rate that was announced today, 3%, and we think this will be the lowest in the North East. And as my colleague has said, if you vote Reform, you get Reform. We will take this seriously and we will deliver for our people. For years, the default position was maximum council tax rises, as our opposition has constantly done. The previous administration went to the limit. The assumption was simple: spend more, charge more. We have taken a different approach. In just 10 months, we have identified over £15 million worth of revenue savings and over £20 million worth of capital savings, not cuts through frontline or care services, but through efficiency, procurement reform, tighter financial controls, and the start of a serious transformation programme. At the same time, as my colleagues have said, we're prioritising the care emergency. directing capital and focus where it is most needed to protect vulnerable residents and stabilise the system long term. We are focused on those vulnerable people and those left behind communities. The budget turns the tide. It shows the Council can live within its means, protect essential services and keep tax increases below inflation. And we are only just getting started. The opposition, by contrast, has spent years rinsing the taxpayer to fund vanity projects and their net zero obsessions. If that model had worked, you'd still be running this council, but you're not. The public chose reform, and that's what we're delivering. You guys don't want to give up the day job because you're not coming back across this side of the chamber anytime soon. I urge members to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hopgood.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I must also congratulate Councillor Grimes and Councillor Husband. In just a few short months, they've apparently managed to achieve what generations of finance portfolio holders could only dream of, balancing Durham's budget by sheer willpower and a highlighter pen. We've been told they've gone line by line through the budget. It sounds heroic, except, and this is the part that matters, the bulk of the savings, efficiencies and service changes were already modelled or being modelled. In fact, I think Councillor Grimes has already said, over a third of them were consulted upon and built into the medium-term financial plan last year, and indeed approved as part of last year's budget. They were sitting there in spreadsheets, carefully worked through, costed and stress-tested by officers. So if the great line-by-line exercise involved opening last year's Excel file and scrolling, well, indeed, you have been successful. And let's not forget the small matter, about more than £27 million this year alone of extra funding arriving from central government, the largest settlement this council has ever received, including many millions of dedicated grant funding that would have been provided to whichever administration was running this council. Let's not continue to try kid people that funding, like the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is fully grant funded, or many millions of pounds of the money being invested into highways maintenance and schools, is also received that way. Or indeed, the extra one-off funding, which has already been mentioned, that has become available for this budget by utilising the Extended Producer Responsibility Grant, funding to underpin core waste management and disposal costs of £7.592 million, and the reduction of employers' pension fund contributions following the triennial review of the Durham Pension Fund of £4.25 million. Now, there's nothing wrong with inheriting a stable financial and stewarding it sensibly. That's responsible administration. Indeed, you have had external experts confirm the stability that you inherited, despite claims to the contrary in the run-up to the election. What is wrong, though, is presenting inherited groundwork and a historically generous settlement as though it were a sudden outbreak of financial genius. We all know the real test is not this year. This year, financially speaking, was the equivalent of a 10-pin bowling match with the bumpers up. The real test comes when settlements tighten, pressures grow, and there isn't millions of pounds of headroom cushioning the landing. You've had the luxury this year of also having a multi-year settlement. So in setting this budget, you do so with the full and real knowledge of what you will be receiving for the remainder of this electoral term. And when that moment arrives, I will genuinely watch with a smile, and not out of spite, but out of interest, to see whether the confidence we've heard is matched by competence when the spreadsheets stop being so forgiving, because this year was most definitely the easy one. Chair, we will not be supporting this budget. We will not support a budget that increases financial stress to those who already struggle by giving them bills for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jonathan Elmer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to speak for long. I just want to very briefly speak about my situation in Brandon, where we've been fighting a war on litter for a number of years. We have a very small number of council staff that actually are responsible for litter picking. We have a neighbourhood warden, and we've tried to augment that service by teams of local residents going out as volunteers, doing litter picking, and it's still a struggle. It's still, you know, you get it cleared and then it's just as bad a week later. So I just want to make the very simple point that given the considerable additional funds that central government were able to provide for this administration, you didn't have to cut that frontline service. It wasn't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Healy.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Three things I'd like to raise, especially directed at the previous administration, you know, the coalition of chaos that was inflicted upon the people of Durham. That in 2023 and 2024, council tax was increased by 4.99, the maximum possible amount. 24 to 25, the coalition of chaos again increased the council tax by 4.99%. And I've heard a lot from the opposition today about the poor being persecuted and the poor having to pay tax for the first time. I think if the opposition actually opened their eyes and actually went out into the real world, they would see that the real poor are the workers who get up every morning before the sun rises and goes out to work hard for the day, not those on the benefits who are very often better off than the workers. But the workers pay 100% of the council tax. And the council tax under the coalition of chaos was maxed out. So I will support the budget because we are in support of the workers of this country, and we are in support of the lowest possible tax on those who are struggling already.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGuinness.
Cheers, Chair. I just wanted to come back at Councillor Wilkes and say that in no way did anyone on this side of the room vote against road safety. We voted against your poorly thought through road safety amendment, which we feel would be ineffectual. We take road safety very seriously. And equally on the parking charges matter, he knows fine well that if his administration had kept costs in line with inflation, there would be no need to increase said costs, but they didn't want to do it, and now we have to make that decision.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin.
Chair, it's disappointing that our amendments fell, but thank you, Councillor, for hearing them out and debating them. This is a budget that is an injustice to every single one of our residents, whatever their political leaning might be. I want to take a moment to particularly draw attention to reducing our neighbourhood budgets. There are many arguments, discussions on how fairly Durham County Council distributes the money it has. Our ward budgets are one of the few ways that every part of County Durham can feel a bit of love from the council. Funding spent directly on our communities on things that they really care about. And this is why when the amendment I led on, I ensured that that funding was distributed to every councillor in the interest of fairness and equal funding. This cut signals further steps towards centralisation of funding, which is worrying for someone that believes deeply in taking power away from the top. We cannot ignore that what is happening today only occurred due to the greater than usual government settlement from Labour. Funding created from that employer's national insurance increase. Remember that tax increase this last year that destroyed so many jobs. More money is a positive step to help local authorities balance the books, but it does nothing to address the longer-term lack of financial power we have to really improve communities' lives. Note a very recent Guardian article citing that Hartlepool Labour councillors are ready to resign over the government settlement. Labour are not doing what Labour exist to do. Chair, now what does this budget tell us about the new reform world order? That it's plenty of smoke and mirrors to hide failed election promises. If you were a Reform voter, you were spun the line in those leaflets, "We'll freeze council tax." There was no asterisk or small print that it would just be the core council tax. You will be breaking that commitment to voters by backing Nigel Farage's right-hand man's budget. Now, as Liberal Democrats, we support the extra provision for special educational needs, and we really welcome those proposals that have been put forward. But remember, this is a council...
1 minute, Councillor.
This is a council that has to work for everyone. Just because you're a parent of a child with special educational needs doesn't mean you don't care about how our county looks. These budget cuts will make our county visibly worse. Just because you're in the council's social care system doesn't mean you don't care about County Durham's economy. The cuts to capital investment will stall the progress made on growth. You might even be someone who can't get their son or daughter into a SEND school, who came out last year's local elections voting for and wanting a council tax freeze. You're not even getting that. This leads to a council that works for nobody. I cannot vote for a budget where everybody feels the direct negative consequences of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sexton.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point, if you freeze something, it still exists. If you freeze 5%, it stays at 5%. Thanks to Paul and the officers for pulling this report together, and as stated, there's a legal requirement for us to set a budget. So we need to set a budget. I'm gobsmacked, actually, that there hasn't been an alternative budget put forward, considering all of the conversations we had in Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board as well. It's also identified the fair funding review by the officer is not fair at all, and that goes across all political parties. That doesn't seem to be acknowledged by people over that side of the room at all. We're talking about, and I've laboured this point, for want of a better word, for many years, those of you who've been here long enough. It doesn't always get picked up in the local newspapers, but I'll say it again, and it's not me wanting to go in, by the way. We talk about things on the spreadsheet, stress tested. Yeah? Did we stress test the DLI and its delivery? Currently around £10 million over. God knows what it'll finish at. Did we stress test the bus station? Currently 5 or 6 million over and ongoing. Did we stress test the HQ strategy? We're not there yet, but we're 2 years behind schedule, so it's obviously costing money. And this administration, by the way, are bringing that exit 3 months forward, saving hundreds of thousands of pounds. So you can go on about stress testing, you can go on about wasting this, putting taxes up, etc. This is my 9th or 10th budget, and I've stood up every time to say I don't want to put council tax up where we've got huge reserves. Those huge reserves are less than half of what they were in 2021, I believe. Yeah, we had a huge capital spend programme, huge revenue going alongside that.
1 minute, Councillor.
This is the best balanced budget that I've seen, and I will absolutely be voting for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair of the Police and Crime Panel of Durham and Darlington, it would be remiss of me to not mention our Police and Crime Commissioner, Labour's Joy Allen, who has not only raised the budget, but went to her own Labour-led Home Office asking to double the maximum allowed throughout the rest of England, ignoring the Police and Crime Panel's recommendations to increase her precept by the maximum in England. It's been mentioned on a number of occasions today about the changes made in the budget, about increases to parish and town council precepts as a result. I would like to clarify that I have 5 parish councils within my constituency, none of which receive a significant amount of money, so it is utterly unfair for them to support residents of other areas via their council tax. Councillor Crute actually stated today, this change will force parish and town councils to increase precepts. This is untrue for all parish and town councils. Even Wood Parish Council, for example, the county's first Reform majority parish council, will be decreasing its precept by 5%. Parish and town council areas should be held accountable for the way they use or misuse their precept that they're asking for, and will be held accountable at the next vote for those increases. For that reason, as well as many others, I will be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Emma Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to state that I am in support of this budget because my residents elected me to do what's best, not to feed the previous joint administration's ego. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shulman.
Yeah, while I sympathise with Councillor Elmer having to go out litter picking, it has nothing to do with the budget. The budget is absolutely well balanced and everything, and I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just a quick point, Chair, that many people who work and are on the lowest incomes are also being hit by the local council tax reduction scheme changes. It does not only affect those on benefits. This is a tax rise for the poorest, including the working poor, including a single working parent struggling to get by.
Thank you, Councillor. There's nobody else registered to speak. Call on Councillor Husband. You reserve your right to speak if you wish. Would you like to exercise that right?
Absolutely, Chair. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment, everybody. Good grief, what a chore. Right, where do we start? Wasting time here, aren't I? So I think I'll start by, I'm going to say a quick thank you to Paul and his team. I think we all agree that a massive amount of effort's gone into this budget from the Reform Administration, officers that have helped us to produce what I would say is the best budget this council's seen in the last 15 years, qualified by the fact that we are seeing, well, we've seen 5%, 5%, 5% in the last 3 years of this administration alone, with £17 million of reserves being spent to deliver those increases. Wow. So, what are we getting? We're delivering a massively reduced 1.99% increase on the budget we inherited from them, with no use of reserves, having only been in the control of this council for 10 months. Unfortunately, we've got 3 years to go. And something that this last administration has obviously failed to do. We are the party of low tax. It's as simple as that. That's why we've been elected. This is why we're here. We are here to fight tax increases. That's another fact for you. The first time in 15 years, it sends a signal to the council taxpayers out there that things are changing in County Durham. We have benefited our residents by reviewing capital spend and aborting projects that were high risk and likely to spiral out of control, as Councillor Sexton has already beautifully articulated. For example, things like the Durham bus station, 7 million over budget, the DLI Museum, 13 million over budget, 20 million over budget right there. £20 million on just these two schemes. We will not be borrowing money willy-nilly, something administration did, in fact. We entered this council as well with a £1 billion borrowing commitment. Let's not forget that. That is not lucky. We are now delivering huge investment in our county. 264 million of new schemes, such as the new Villarreal School and the upgrades for Findoon, creating 200 SEN places, schemes that we are investing in to save money, Councillor Hopgood, something the last administration failed to do. This is part of Doge, right? You may not understand it, you may not grasp it, but we are all Doge. Officers who are looking at their own portfolios, our portfolio holders, looking at everything at line by line, portfolio by portfolio, seeing underspends across portfolio. This is a culture of Doge, watching the money we spend. I'll give you some examples of what we're going to invest in. £7 million expanding in-house provision for children's and adult social care. £26 million for the new replacement school at Villarreal. £13 million to increase the capacity of Findoon high needs education facility. £40 million to increase the capacity and make improvements to a wide-ranging education asset base. £78 million in new transport and road projects, hint, hint. Good grief. Which will be subject to the regional mayor assuring County Durham gets its fair share of capital allocations, topped up by our commitment to borrow to invest in our transport infrastructure. During the years ahead, we will need to invest much more in these assets. Again, one step at a time. The commitment is also to invest over £19 million in our communities, nearly £3 million to tackle the blight of homelessness and to increase our capacity to provide temporary accommodation to local residents and families who are in most need of emergency housing, supported to get them back on their feet. Investment, £52 million in our corporate buildings, assets, IT infrastructure, transformational projects ensure we're well equipped to deliver services. Should give you some comfort, Councillor Bell, that we're planning ahead. Truly to deliver value for money for our residents and businesses. That doesn't sound very lucky. Moving on. Whoop, nearly. We will look to draw in additional grant funding also on the back of the increase in borrowing to mitigate the impact of increased borrowing costs, which will emerge in the later stages in the next decade. However, I am content that this additional borrowing is actually affordable, it's prudent, and in fact necessary. And when compared to other authorities in the region and nationally, as Paul's again articulated, I believe our debt remains affordable, proportionate, and sustainable. After all, the borrowing commitments went from 350 million to almost 1 billion in the last 4 years, while reserves dwindled. Is that just unlucky? I asked the question. Of course. Increasing the council tax by any amount is never an easy or comfortable decision, but a 1.99% in the social care precept with 0% on core council tax is significantly below the rate of inflation, and it's the first time this council has done so in many, many years, and also below the rate at which welfare benefits and pensions will increase in April, and less than half the national living wage increase, representing, though, an increase of 52 pence per week for those living in a Band A property. We will, by my reckoning, be making one of the lowest increases in the region and across the country. That's what our Reform administration delivers. And just on Councillor Croot's point, you're bleating on about grants and how we're lucky. Well, how come you haven't mentioned the Labour councils of Newcastle, Gateshead, Sunderland, North Tyneside, South Tyneside? Were they just unlucky?
Yeah.
Anyway, here we go. Labour councils across the North East just can't compete with County Durham. This is an open door policy, as Councillor Quinn's again emphasised several times. We're approachable. We could have had these discussions about tweaks and amendments and listened and maybe considered, but without any chance and time to consider or take to scrutiny, which is obviously the usual process when you're trying to put together a £1.5 billion budget. That would have been the way I would have done it. So, we've had these discussions in full cabinet 4 months without any opposition, representation, questions at cabinet. Where were you in November? Where were you in December? Where were you in January? I mean, just last Friday, so again, 2 amendments come in to the budget. The opposition requested that we do not have visibility of these amendments until today. They preach transparency. They preach a collective effort for our residents. And these are the games they play. This is not a game. Let me give you some advice, okay? Our next budget, or a budget that's been in progress for months, it's been everywhere, cross-party. You've already been through it. You've already agreed it. This is just a peacocking political point scoring opportunity to waste everybody's time. Looking at the amendments, which total, what, 300 grand-ish? Well, a few hundred grand, I should say. It's about 0.02% of the budget, right, that you said was the worst budget ever. A budget you went in the newspapers with. The worst budget ever, worst budget history. Yet you agree with 99.98% of it. If we'd done your daft amendments, you would have been happy. Good grief, it's really difficult to take you seriously. Bill Edgar, I hope you're watching this, by the way. Hope you can even consider. So how can we even consider the amendments without scrutiny at this time? We might have done so, blah, blah, blah. But rocking up the 11th hour, cloak and dagger, it's not for us. It's a budget in the back of a fag packet. It's nothing but peacocking, and to be honest, I'm done talking about it. But let me tell you this. We have got a £350,000 contingency budget, so if Councillor Wilkes wants to run to the press and talk about lollipop ladies or grass cutting, if we want to find a lady, a lollipop lady, we're advertising now actually, if you want to apply, Councillor Wilkes, it could be a good career change for you. But we've got the funds there to react to it. We've got the 5mm grass covered that might grow between days 10 and 12. We sharpen our blades internally. But if we need to get another grass cutter, we can invest. But what this budget does is set the scene. You were confusing us with a party of U-turns. We do not U-turn at reform. We've made a decision for this budget, and there's another lesson learned for you. We don't believe that council taxpayers who have no garden should pay for towards your bin collection. We don't believe that council taxpayers who don't drive or don't have a car should pay towards your parking permits. We don't believe that people in Chelsea Street should have to pay towards the discretionary grants to parish councils who have huge wage bills, purchase orders galore for new iPhones and iPads, huge reserves in the bank, parish and town councils with these huge reserves spending more on wages than what they do on their own communities. And interestingly, on this point, And on this point, I see Peterlee Town Council as one example, blaming reform for the precept. Yet their 2024 audit, produced by Clive Owen, and available on the council website, of course, they had a 10.5% precept increase in 2023. That's not reform's fault, surely. They acknowledged the incoming grant reduction scheme from your budget in 2024, that a precept increase would be a minimum of 7% by now. That was documented back then. This is well before May 2025. This is what we are dealing with. Town
Councillor,
councils
1 minute,
who can't manage their budgets, history of poor performance, blaming others. Sounds like you lot, actually. Let's talk about unnecessary zero waste, net zero waste. We don't believe that the people in Anfield Plain, for example, should pay to replace the failed net zero air source heat pump at the Morrison Bussy Depot that you had installed. £387,000. It's never worked from day one. What makes it worse? They ripped out the gas network. 200 grand to put it back in. Ed Miliband's best mate. Unbelievable. Maybe you were just unlucky, but like the thing hasn't worked. My God. Councillor Neil was so grateful. Let's not mention the £500,000 EV bin truck. We'll not go there. That simply was rubbish. Pardon the pun. The best one yet, solar panels, 17-year payback for leisure centres with an end of life in the next decade. Went to scrutiny, actually. We were called in. No payback for this administration, the next administration after that. We might get payback in year 17 if the buggers are still working. Pardon my language.
Time, councillor, time.
I'm not going to kind of go any more detail because it's just too frustrating, to be honest with you. But
time, councillor.
I think we'll just kind of leave it at that. But actually, what I will say, talk about grants. 1 minute. Talk about grants.
Time, councillor.
£50 million CRSTS grant cut.
Councillor. Thanks for that, councillor. You now have a right to reply, Deputy Leader of the Council. Councillor Grimes, do you wish to reply?
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to just pick up on a couple of things that Councillor Bell and Councillor Crute suggested. It's not often that I get accused of being a lucky fella by both Labour and the Tories, but here we are. I should be so lucky, 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 lucky. The problem is, my friends, that I don't feel especially lucky, and I don't feel like my residents feel especially lucky right now, actually. We had a Conservative government that allowed mass migration to go off the charts. We get, in places like Anfield Plain, HMOs forced upon us, people that we don't want to live next door to, being bussed in and forced on our communities. I don't feel lucky in having the highest tax since World War II. That, you know, the Blitz wasn't as bad as the Tories.
Thanks, Labour.
I don't feel lucky to have had that continued by the Labour Party. I don't feel lucky that young people in Tanfield and Anfield Plain have to struggle to get on the employment ladder as young people needing that experience because of national insurance increases and insurmountable wage increases that will put people out of work. I don't feel lucky to have the highest electricity costs in the entire world. I don't feel lucky that NSK in Peterlee is closing down as a direct consequence of this government's reckless assault on industrial strategy. I don't feel lucky that both Labour and the Conservatives betrayed the working class in this country. I think ultimately, my friends, that we, on this side of the chamber, are honouring our pledge to the public. I know that's a difficult concept for both the Tories and the Labour Party to grasp, but actually, that's what it's about.
Don't forget the Lib
It's
Dems.
not the sort of last desperate gasp of dying parties. This is actually a party on the rise, a party in ascension that's serious about delivering for the people. And I am so incredibly proud of every single person on this side of the chamber that has got us to this point, and also to the officers that have worked with us. We voted in those two amendments that were put forward, the chicken feed that was offered to the public, they actually suggested that they would put up expenditure and thus put up council tax. Ultimately, that the council tax bung for town and parish councils to not stand on their own 2 feet, to actually engage in what I would deem to be a form of double taxation. I don't think that's fair on large parts of our county. I think actually we should allow them to stand on their own 2 feet and to be accountable for their expenditure in exactly the same way that I am. The benefit claimants who are going to pay 10% of their council tax, 10%, that ain't a lot to ask to contribute to services that we all enjoy and take advantage of. We are the party of workers. We will not shy away from that. We're the party of Alarm Clock Britain, and we will never, ever apologise for being on the side of law-abiding, hard-working citizens. Yep, some people on benefits may well be in work. You know, I came from a single-parent family, but you know what? She went out and she worked every single damn day. I know it's a hard concept, actually, to grasp, that people on this side of the chamber may have met a working-class person once or twice. I can't say the Liberal Democrats have met many of them in their time. Now, you better not be poor under reform, they say. Well, you better not be poor under the Labour Party and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Nick Clegg in 2010 shunned nuclear energy. That could have reduced our energy bills. The Conservative Party came in and decided to hike our taxes and go for net zero. The Labour Party have basically laced with gold everything that the Tories did. It's an absurdity to suggest that we are the problem here. This is a coalition of the lanyard class over there who cannot get their heads around the fact that they do not speak for the people of County Durham. They are about as out of touch, out of step with County Durham as if I was to parade George Osborne up and down the bloody market. Labour, max tax assumption, and the NECA asks that we've given to that authority, to the combined authority, I hope Councillor Croot is going to get on to his own government and ask them to actually fund schemes that we need if they care so deeply about transport infrastructure and other matters. Labour MPs, I repeat, said that we'd received 170 million quid. I mean, my God, somewhere over the rainbow doesn't quite cut it. 170 million quid. It's 50 million quid. I don't know where you got that from. It's probably on the amount of money that we're sending overseas to
Councillor,
foreigners
1 minute.
and not in our own communities. Ultimately, 30% of the savings that the Lib Dems agreed have been accepted and carried on into this budget. We came up with the lion's share. We did the hard yards. It's we on this side of the chamber who are responsible for delivering the lowest council tax in 15 years. We did that. You should all be damn well proud of yourself and vote for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ready? I will now hand over to the Director of Legal and Democratic Services to proceed with the recorded vote on the motion related to the medium-term financial plan for 2026 to 2027 and 2028 to 29, and the revenue and capital budget for 26-27.
Thank you, Chair. So because we've got two individual items on the agenda, we will need to have two separate votes. So if I could just ask, I know it's been a long meeting, but if you could stay in the room until the votes have closed in both items, please. It helps us enormously working out who's in the room at the point at which the question's put. So the first vote will be on item 9, which is the medium-term financial plan 26 to 27 through to 28-29, and revenue and capital budget 26-27. If you're voting in favour, press 1, 2 against, and 3 to abstain. And the buzzer will sound when the vote is open. If you've got problems with your handset, raise it in the air and a member of the team will help. And if you press the wrong button, pressing the right one will correct your vote.
We'll close the vote now. Item 9, the medium-term financial plan for 26-27, 28-29, and revenue and capital budget 26-27. For 55, against 24, one abstention. Recommendations are carried. Okay. Right, if we can, we're now going to vote on the second part of the budget, which is regarding the capital budget for 26-27.
Yes, so this is item 10, council tax setting in order to meet the county council's council tax requirement for 26-27. Once again, it's 1 to vote in favour, 2 against, 3 to abstain.
We're now closing the vote. Item 10, the council is setting tax setting in order to meet the county council's council tax requirement for 26-27. We've got for the motion 55, against 22, and 3 abstentions. The recommendations are carried. Hopefully you'll process that vote. We now move on to item 11, which is the questions from members, and we have received one question for the meeting from Councillor Richard Bell. The question will be displayed on the screen, and can I invite Councillor Bell to ask the question, please?
Thanks, Chair. It was understandable that the new Reform administration wanted to review the change from AAPs to local networks. It is not understandable why 10 months later there is no answer forthcoming. Local network staff have continued to support members with their neighbourhood fund projects, but all the good work of the AAPs with links to other statutory and voluntary organisations and the wider public through forums is being eroded. Our main vehicle for consultations is not being used. In areas where AAPs worked well, like Teesdale, I believe real damage has been caused. So when will local networks be fully up and running? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Lyons, I invite you to reply, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bell, for your question. Like you, I was also frustrated when it came to my portfolio late last year, so I did feel your frustrations. As you will be aware, the transition from area action partnerships to local networks was agreed by the previous administration in November 24. In May 25, with the change in the political leadership at Durham County Council, the current Cabinet wished to assess and review the overall role and remit of local networks to ensure they fully align with what residents and localities value. The 25-26 financial year was originally outlined as a development year for local networks in November's 24 Cabinet paper. So it was the previous Cabinet who had actually agreed that. As you have alluded to, local network staff are now deployed and aligned to defined geographical areas and are assisting elected members in their community champion role and supporting in the development, appraisal and administration of their councillor grant budgets. Local network teams have also been continuing to work on non-funded activity within their localities. The intention is for local networks to be operating on a revised model early in the new financial year, pending agreement by Cabinet very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any supplementary questions, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. What does very shortly mean? Will it next month, April? Because it's been said when I've asked informally that it will be very shortly for about the last 6 months. Thank you. Well,
I can say that's coming to Cabinet in March, and then it will be rolled out beginning of April, as long as we can get all of the officer times, because it was going to be April to May, but we're going to be hoping to push for March, April, due to the frustration, so fingers crossed.
Thank you. That concludes today's meeting. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and for your inputs and discussions. Thanks very much.